Thank you. Good evening and welcome everyone to this meeting of the Western Area Planning Committee, especially those members of the public who are watching the streaming online. I'm Councillor Clive Hooker, Chairman of this committee. The members of the committee in attendance this evening and contributing towards the applications being considered this evening are Councillor Adrian Abbs, Dennis Bennyworth, Phil Barnett, Jeff Cant, Caroline Culver, Tony Vickers, our Vice Chairman, and Howard Wollaston. The officers attending and presenting the applications to the committee this evening are Simon Till, the Western Area Team Leader, Jake Brown, Planning Officer, Gareth Dowding, Senior Highways Engineer, Sharon Armour will be my legal advisor this evening, and Gordon Oliver will clerk the meeting. I'm also assisted by Tom Dunn, who will be the Zoom meeting host. Before I start the meeting, I'd like to explain, for the benefit of those watching, that it is being held both via Zoom and with councillors present here in the council chamber. The meeting is also being live streamed on YouTube, so the public are able to follow the proceedings this evening. Please can I ask everyone present in the meeting area to make sure that they switch on their microphones when they speak, to speak directly into them, and to switch them off when finished. Can I also ask that everyone in the chamber please put your mobile phones to silent or turn them off, and also turn the sound off on your laptops, please, members. Regarding the safety of this meeting this evening, if we hear a fire alarm, we must leave the building immediately. Please leave via the safe emergency exit, which will be shown to us by the trained officers present. Please follow any instructions given by those officers. The assembly point is the Dolphin car park just over the road. If the lockdown alarm is sounded, we will remain in our seats and await instructions from the officers. I will then adjourn the meeting until such time as it is safe to proceed. To be consistent with council meetings, I'd like to remind members that we are subject to the council's code of conduct, which requires us to uphold certain standards, those being respectful to each other and to officers and members of the public present. Members may not always agree with one another or the officers' recommendations, but I would ask that if in any disagreements, we are always respectful to others' views and their position. So we now move on to item 1 of the agenda, which is the apologies. Mr. Oliver, do we have any apologies, please?
Yes, Chairman, we've had apologies from Councillor Claire Rolls.
Thank you. Members, number 2 on the agenda are the minutes, to approve the minutes of the last meeting held on the 31st of August of this year. Members, any observations, please, of those minutes? See no hands. I see no hands on the screen. So I will propose those minutes. Do I have a second, please? Councillor Cant, thank you. All in favour, please raise. Just one abstention, that's Councillor Vickers, who wasn't at that meeting on that day. Thank you, members. I will therefore sign those minutes. Thank you. Now move on to item 3, members' declarations of interests. Councillor.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to declare an interest in items 1 and 2, which I've been lobbied about, but I will make my decision this evening based on the evidence presented and the discussion that we have. Thank you.
Thank you. I think on behalf of all of us, I think I want to declare that an interest in the 3rd item, the land adjacent to the Phoenix Centre, which is a joint venture application submitted on behalf of the Council and Sovereign Housing. I, as you all are, a member of West Berks Council, and as such have an interest in this application. However, as a member of the Planning Committee and a representative of the local planning authority, we will consider this application on its merits independently of the Council's wider concerns as a landowner and developer, and will listen to the debate tonight with an open mind before deciding how to vote on that application. If that declaration could be recorded, please, on behalf of all members. Do we all agree? Thank you. We now move on to item 4, the planning application. Councillor, thank you, Councillor Wollaston.
Thank you, Chairman. Item 1, I'm the ward member and I've been lobbied vociferously by numerous objectors. And as such, whilst predisposed to object, I will listen to the debate and vote accordingly. And on item 3, I'm the portfolio holder for housing. And as such, I have a keen interest in seeking further affordable housing in West Berkshire.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Barnett.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm a member of Newby Town Council and its Planning and Highways Committee, where item 3 on tonight's agenda was discussed, but tonight I'll weigh up all the evidence and vote accordingly.
Thank you. Councillor Bennyworth.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to, like Councillor Culver said, that I've been lobbied on items 1 and 2, and also I'm a ward member for the second item.
Thank you. Councillor Vickers.
Same as Councillor Bennett, I'm on Planning and Highways, Newby Town Council, and we've had this one before us.
Thank you. All done on our declarations of interest. Thank you. Now move on to item 4, the planning applications. Members, we have 3 applications to consider on the agenda this evening. Application number 1 is 21/03083. This is the land adjacent to the M4 Membry Airfield, Ramsbury Road at Lamborn Woodlands. The second application is Lake House at West Wood Road. And the third application is the land adjacent to the Phoenix Centre, Newton Road in Newbury. Now, members, just a general... Sorry, Councillor Abbs.
So I just want to come in after you, Vice Chair, Chairman, rather, as soon as you said your comments.
Okay, thank you very much. Before we look at the applications this evening, members, I'd just like to make it clear to the members of the public that the presentations of the applications will be given tonight with the aid of photographs, site photographs. This is due to the council business being suspended during the mourning period of the death of Her Majesty the Queen. During that week, no site meetings were taken, and therefore to expedite business and not to delay these applications for another month, some of them have been pending for a while. The decision was taken to revert really to what we were doing over the COVID period, and that is to consider these applications by photographic presentation. So that is the reason this evening that we will be looking at extensive photographs and make it clear that the members haven't been specifically to a site meeting, although they may have driven past and looked at it. Councillor Abbs, do you wish to add to that?
Yeah, thank you very much, Chairman. The reason I wanted to raise this right now, I'm extremely nervous about not doing site visits and then making decisions because photographs are not a replacement. And whilst I absolutely understand that we're in a period of mourning and during COVID, we had to have exceptions, I'd much prefer that we defer all of these this evening and actually turn up to site visits. Now, I attended the Membry site visit last time around, so I know this site very well, but some things were raised there that, you know, that I don't see when we don't go to sites. In other words, you know, we get information, and the final bit of what I wanted to say, and maybe the legal officer can help us out here. Are we sure we're not leaving ourselves open because it was a choice not to do the site visit to a legal challenge if should these things go to appeal?
Thank you, Councillor Abbs. A fair discussion did go ahead as to whether we should or we shouldn't. Mrs. Armour, whether you want to answer this or Mr. Till, I'll leave it up to yourselves.
It may well be both of us that need to answer it. I mean, I think these sites and questions have been considered, and my understanding, having spoken to the development control manager, it is that careful consideration was taken on whether photos were sufficient to show members the sites. It was decided that was the case. I mean, obviously, if during the debate members feel that they don't have sufficient information to reach a decision, then it's up to them to make a proposal to defer it.
Come back, Chairman.
I'll just let Mr. Till come in first when Mrs. Armour's finished.
that's really all I've got to say. If members obviously in any matter, whether it's site visits, photos or anything, don't feel they have sufficient information, then obviously they can't reach a decision and it should be a deferral. But whether that's something we want to consider when we go through the agenda, because officers, having considered these matters, feel the photos are sufficient tonight.
Okay, if I may use the one example of memory, when we were at the site visit, there's only 3 of us that managed to turn up for that visit, which was disappointing in itself. But what wasn't shown and won't be shown in any photographs, or unless there's a video recording, we're going to be shown as well, is all of the heavy traffic that was going down a route that was not really meant to be used, and how much that can then vector into decision making.
I think we'll come on to those issues afterwards.
Well, we can, and I can bring all this up in debate.
If you would, please. Let's have a clarification, Mr. Till.
Thank you, Chairman. Really, I would like to support what you've already said and what Mrs. Armour has said, that officers have entered into a great deal of detailed consideration as to whether it was appropriate to continue with a meeting this evening in light of the fact that site visits needed to be cancelled. As part of that process, photography was reviewed in terms of what we held and what we could provide members as information. Packs of photography were issued to members that were based on the site photography that was held on the electronic planning file. And it was the view of officers that in order to continue the important business of the planning committee and expediting decisions being made on planning applications, that it was important to continue this meeting tonight. If members do take an alternative view regarding the deferral of any of the items before you, then that is an option that members have, and that can be put to the vote in the normal turn of events. But it is a matter of business continuity that we go ahead with the meeting tonight to continue to consider these applications in your officer's view. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Till. One response, please.
Thank you very much, Chairman.
Short one, if you would, please.
Absolutely. Whilst absolutely I respect both the officers and legal's opinion in this matter, I would like it recorded in the minutes. I would have preferred us as members to take a vote on whether we were comfortable going forward without going through several hours worth of presentations, because if we're all nervous about the decision making, surely we should know now and save all of these people time as well.
So, as a form of introduction, for the benefit of those members of the public who are attending in person or watching online unfamiliar with the meeting format, I will now briefly outline the process for each application. The officers will present the application to the committee. The drawings, site plans and any deemed relevant material submitted on the planning file will be shown as part of their presentation on the screens in the chamber and on your laptops at home. I will then invite the representatives from the following groups to come up to the lectern in front, and I will ask Mr. Dunn to invite them into a meeting on Zoom, if need be, to present their case to the committee. Each group will have a total of 5 minutes to speak. The order of the presentations will be first the town or the parish councillors, objectors, then the supporters, then the applicant or the agent. And on conclusion of each of these submissions, I will ask members of the committee if they have any questions of clarification on those submissions. Members of the committee will not be permitted to introduce new material in their questions. Then I will invite the ward member to speak. They will also have 5 minutes to present their case. Committee members may then, on conclusion of that presentation, ask questions of clarification. The committee will then, committee members will then have the opportunity to ask questions of clarification of the officers' presentations. The committee will then debate the application and vote on the decision. So the first application before the committee this evening is 21/03083. This is the land adjacent to the M4, Membury Airfield, and this is the change of use to Class B. And this has come to committee due to more than 10 letters of objection. The officer presenting this application is Mr. Brown. Mr. Brown, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. This application seeks permission for the change of use of land to a B8 storage and distribution use for the open storage of vehicles, plant, equipment, materials and machinery associated with the groundworks contracting business. A new access onto the service road to Membry services is also proposed. This application has been brought to committee for determination as it has received more than 10 representations objecting to the application and is recommended for approval subject to the conditions proposed in section 8 of the agenda report. The site is located directly adjacent to the designated protected employment area of Membry and within the North Wessex Downs area of outstanding natural beauty. Planning permission for the same site and the same proposed use was previously granted under delegated powers in 2018 as detailed on page 6 of the agenda. A copy of that decision notice and officer's report is provided on pages 19 to 25 of the agenda report. The site was previously a grassed area of land with no formal granted use associated prior to that granted in 2018. An EIA screening opinion has been issued by the council confirming that the development proposed is not EIA development within the meaning of the EIA regulations. Objections have been received from Lamborn Parish Council for the reasons set out in the agenda. No objections have been raised by the local highway authority, National Highways or Archaeology. The Environment Agency has advised that it has no comments to make. 21 representations objecting to the proposal and 5 representations supporting the proposal have been received for the reasons summarised on pages 9 and 10 of the agenda and in the update report. Here we have a view of the site from the unnamed road, the service access road into Membry service area looking south east. We also have a view from the unnamed road looking into the site northwest, and just to the left of that tree is the location of the proposed new access. And here we have a view of the site looking across the site to the tree lines that border the M4 motorway and a neighbouring facility. The principle of the development was established under the previous permission granted in 2018 as policy CS9 of the core strategy allows for new development schemes adjacent to existing protected employment areas. The impact on the character and appearance of the area and AONB is also considered acceptable, as previously determined by the council in 2018. In respect of the impact on highways, the addition of an estimated 8 van movements, 4 in, 4 out, 4 HGV movements, 2 in, 2 out, and 10 staff vehicle movements, 5 in, 5 out per day, from the development proposed is considered to represent a negligible increase in the overall number of vehicle movements that take place in the local area. In respect of ecology and biodiversity, comments from the council's ecologists raised concerns regarding the amount and location of landscaping originally proposed as shown on this plan here. In order to ensure sufficient ecological connectivity and a biodiversity net gain, additional planting is sought by the ecologist between the already proposed woodland block planting here in the northwestern corner of the site and the proposed planting along the M4. Furthermore, the ecologist has some concerns regarding the width of the proposed planting along the southwestern boundary adjacent to the service road and whether sufficient room is provided for that landscaping, as well as ensuring long-term retention of all of the proposed landscaping and the provision of access points within boundary treatments to be provided at appropriate locations to allow fauna to access the proposed planting areas. Subject to securing a condition and subject to securing by condition an amended landscaping and boundary treatment scheme to address those matters, as is proposed in section 8 of the agenda report, the ecologist raises no objections. With regard to drainage and flooding, the site is located in flood zone 1. Whilst no formal flood risk assessment has been submitted, flooding has been considered and assessed in the submitted design and access statement, and the Environment Agency has not objected to the proposal. Details of sustainable drainage are to be secured by condition. In respect of neighbouring amenity, the use proposed is not considered to introduce any significant detrimental impact on the amenity of the adjacent non-residential properties or those residential properties in the wider area. The proposal is considered to contribute to the economic development in the long term, weighing significantly in favour of granting permission. The environmental considerations have been assessed in terms of design, amenity, and impact on the area, as well as surface water flooding and ecology, and are considered acceptable, subject to conditions. Social considerations overlap those of environmental in terms of amenity and are considered acceptable. Therefore, the development proposed is considered to represent sustainable development. It is important to note that the council has previously considered an application for the same development at the same site in 2018 and granted permission for that development. That previous permission represents a significant material consideration, and it is considered that no material changes have occurred since that permission was granted that would justify refusing this application. Therefore, members are recommended to grant approval subject to the conditions proposed in the agenda and update sheet. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. I will now ask Mr. Dowding for any considerations you've got on highways issues. Mr. Dowding.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. No, I haven't got anything to add at this moment, but obviously any questions that come through yourselves, I will answer later.
Thank you. So members, we now come on to the presentations from our attendees this evening. And as I previously mentioned, the first person up, or the people up this evening, are the Parish Council. And I think we have Councillor Bridget Jones of Lamborn Parish Council. Good evening, Councillor. Thank you for coming along this evening. And just to give you a bit of a heads up, you have 5 minutes. Okay. And at 4 minutes, I'll say you've got a minute. Should you need that. And then if you're getting up to your 5 minutes, I say 10 seconds in conclusion. And then
okay.
That'll be it. So when you're ready, we're looking forward to hear your presentation. Thank you.
Good evening, committee members. Lamborn Parish Council has serious concerns about the impact of this proposal on the local road network, emergency access to the M4, residential amenities and the environment within the ANOB, which washes over the whole parish, including the PEA. The case officer has acknowledged that this site is agricultural land outside the PEA. The previous application has lapsed and therefore the land is a greenfield site, which should have been restored. That it no longer resembles a green field is due entirely to the applicant, who stripped the topsoil, imported additional material and created a large bund, all prior to the current application being submitted. This is not conserving or enhancing a site within the ANOB. The claim to improve biodiversity when it was the applicant who destroyed it in the first place is insulting. The environmental screening was done for another application and only covered a third of the site. The screening exercise which decided this proposal was not an EIA development was apparently done after the applicant had destroyed the green field. Since 2018, when the previous application permission was granted, the numbers of HGVs using the access roads to this site has more than doubled. The Altered Walker Logistics Plan will add hundreds more. Highways has pointed out the lack of public transport and the dangers of walking and cycling on the Ramsbury Road, which make the site unsustainable. The cumulative impact of further developments affects all local villages, especially those living along the 7-kilometre route from Junction 14. Yet planners say the effects are not considered sufficient to give rise to any concerns. Residents who saw and heard the increase in large vehicles when this applicant prepared the site do have concerns. Their complaints about noise, obstruction and out-of-hours working were ignored or fobbed off. Thus, they have no confidence in the efficacy of planning conditions. If this application can only be approved if there are conditions, but those conditions cannot be enforced, then the application should be refused. Those who attended the initial site visit are very aware of the amount of traffic using the services road as a way onto the M4. It seems Transport England is not enforcing restrictions of use on the road. Thus, the context of the site is compromised. A pull-in area for vehicles, which highways suggest will mitigate lorries blocking emergency vehicles, is therefore rendered inadequate. And the fact remains that vehicles entering and leaving will be turning across a busy road. The potential for delaying emergency responses to motorway accidents is high. As more developments are permitted, the demand for electricity has risen. The local electricity supply has been interrupted, with generators having to be brought in for residents. The amount of security lighting on premises has increased, and yet there is apparently no requirement for developers to consider and sustain critical infrastructure. I'd like to remind committee members that when West Berkshire Council employed consultant Stantec to inform the local plan on where industry was required within West Berkshire, no further requirement was identified at Membury, but it was required at Newbury and Reading. The disadvantages that this application will bring to the parish outweigh the advantages which it may offer in terms of employment. Lamborn Parish Council asked you to refuse this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Jones. If we just wait there 1 minute, Councillor Vickers has a question you'd like to ask.
Thank you very much. Just pursuing some of the points you raised about traffic, are you saying that the motorway access road is being used by a significant number of HGVs
Very
who you
much so.
believe aren't, part of the motorway function? They are just taking that route onto the motorway.
Yes, when I attended the site visit, there were multiple large vehicles loaded with hay. They don't have access to service roads. There were many public vehicles. There were many HGVs that weren't recovery vehicles. And in fact, it was extremely busy. We had to stand back off the road and on a number of occasions.
And is there no sort of control? There's no sort of manned gate?
There used to be a barrier, I believe, many years ago, but there is no manned gate.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Abbs.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Just a little clarity. Well, I was at that site meeting with you, so I remember the traffic. But is your concern re that traffic, the accident is likely to occur as it comes in and out of the proposed site, or is that the actual concern you have there?
There are multiple concerns. I think that's one of the concerns, and the fact that emergency vehicles may be prevented from attending an accident in a timely fashion.
Right, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Abbs. No more questions, members. Councillor Jones, thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you very much.
We now have the objectors this evening, and we have Mr. Alan Pearce and Mr. Richard Bob Ruckey. Now, members, Mr. Bob Ruckey is reading out a statement on behalf of Mr. King on this application. And when he has finished, Mr. Pearce will take over should there be any time of the 5-minute period of which Mr. Bob Ruckey has just heard. We've got 5 minutes in total. And any questions on the statement or Mr. Neil's presentation, Mr. Neil will answer. So when you're ready, Mr. Bob Ruckey, I'll just give you 5 minutes. I'll give you both notification at 4, and as the previous speaker, I'll say in conclusion with 10 seconds. So when you're ready, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, committee. This submission is by Mr. King, who's a local resident and a member of the Woodland Protection Group. There are many contradictions and inconsistency in the planning officer's report, some of them leading to the committee being provided with misleading and biased information. Much emphasis is placed on the previous approved planning application on this site as being justification to approve this application. For example, in section 2, relevant planning history, strong reference is made to planning application 16/01/6/OUT-MAG, erection of 3 units for research and development. This application was for a different site and is therefore wrong and misleading to reference it. In section 6, appraisal, there is no reference to sustainability in the main issues for consideration. This committee cannot take a decision on this site without a full appraisal of sustainability. Your council officers have previously declared that current development proposals are not sustainable, and in addition, Membury Industrial Area is not sustainable now and no further expansion should be allowed. In paragraph 7.4, the report dismisses cumulative impacts and references the application 19/02979/OUT-MAG, land south of Tower Works Walkers, and 20/00562/COMIND. In particular, the Walkers application and the committee's approval is flawed. It was based on artificially suppressed traffic generation figures, an approach that is unenforceable and which will lead to unprecedented growth of HGV and other vehicle movements. The fact that was recognised by Walkers themselves when they submitted a new business plan, which your planning officers and this committee surprisingly chose to ignore before approving the application. The correct approach would have been to use the UK standard TRICS data, which was recommended by Woodland Protection Group's own traffic consultants and Walkers traffic consultants. The outcome of this was that traffic generation from Walkers was artificially suppressed at 153 vehicle movements per day, instead of the correct forecast of 776 vehicle movements per day. This development and others should not be approved until all the true traffic impact of Walkers is seen on the correct forecasting is used. In summary, the report is poorly presented with obvious errors and inconsistencies which mislead this committee. Sustainability is ignored when it should have the deepest investigation, and when council officers have declared Membury to be unsustainable at present and that no further development should be undertaken. The report dismisses cumulative impacts, which is patently wrong, particularly when Walker's new development is already forecast to add 776 vehicles daily to the local road network, which is already stressed.
1 minute, Mr. Bobroki.
This application should be refused until the council accepts a level of traffic forecast at Membury is beyond reasonable and it gets to grips with the sustainability of the whole Membury industrial area.
Thank you. Mr. Pearce.
Yes, I did lobby committee members on the 12th, and it was again drawing attention to the case officer's report, which in my opinion is erroneous. 7.4 fails to address the cumulative impact of Walkers. This committee passed the Walkers application totally unrestricted with petition 15, and the legal argument is there. So the traffic movements should have been taken into account in this case officer's report. So the main points that I brought to your attention was
I fear you're going to run out of time, Mr. Pearce.
yeah,
I'm afraid your
your
time is up.
okay.
I'm terribly sorry. Thank you. Yeah, we absolutely. If you just wait a minute, gentlemen, we might have some questions for you. Members, any questions on any issues, on highway issues? That was the main topic of the presentation. No, we have no questions. Thank you, Mr. Bobroki. Thank you, Mr. Pearce. We have no supporters for this application this evening, but we do have the agent, Mr. Andrew Turville. Mr. Turville, good evening, sir. Nice to see you again. We saw you at the site meeting. And that's right.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak in this. Sorry, the microphone.
If you just put the microphone on, thank you.
Yeah. Good evening, councillors. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak in support of this application. Clearly, any development at Membury is contentious, and I fear that matters are being conflated by the Walkers logistics application. What members should appreciate is obviously this application or this site was considered to be an extant consent, i.e. a live consent at the time that Walker's was determined. And the traffic issues that are being conjectured about at the Walker's site are being taken to talk this site down. I consider that the officer's report, Jake Brown's report, is exemplary. A number of very minor errors have been identified in it, one referencing an outline application in relation to the site, which was on the site opposite. But in all other respects, it's correct. And it has considered properly the cumulative impacts. There was a screening opinion done, and the screening opinion is in the information pack, and it specifically relates to the fact that the cumulative impact was assessed. As the officer observes, there has been no policy change since the earlier application was put in. The regime is the same, and this application is actually for a less intensive use than that which was originally proposed. It should be remembered also that on the 18 application, there were no objections made by the parish council, by any individual parties. And were it not for the Walker's application, I would submit that there would be no objections in this case either. It's being used as a scapegoat. And if officers take the view, councillors take the view that the application should be refused, it makes it virtually untenable for anybody or any business to do anything at Membry in the future. I haven't really got anything further to add. The report is very, very clear. The traffic issues here are relating to walkers. What walkers actually do and what they might do is neither here nor there in relation to this application. Any other user at Membry is not subject to any restrictions on their movements. If Trinity Grain want to go and decide to use smaller vehicles to transport their grain out of there, they could without restriction. We're saying that there could be a massive increase in movement as a result of the Walker's application, but is that really likely? The Walker's site will carry on as it is, and the projections have been as an extrapolation of the existing movements. And in the context of this site, Mr. Brown has identified what the movements are. They are very limited, less than a dozen a day. The site will provide employment. It will tidy up the area. It has been subject to some very detailed negotiation as to conditions. It would have come forward at the meeting 3 weeks ago, but for some issues on the ecology, the plan which Jake Brown put up earlier, that has been accepted. There has been discussions with the ecologist, and the proposals the ecologist has put forward for biodiversity and net gain have been agreed by the client. And if, should this application be approved, then a plan will be coming forward to actually address that. How much more time have I got?
Another minute.
I've got another minute. In terms of some of the comments made by the objectors, in particular Councillor Jones, the EIA screening was for the whole site, very clearly is for the whole site, not part of the site. I've touched on the enforceability of conditions. This site is now going to be subject to significantly more conditions than were previously put against the earlier application, giving the council significantly more control over it, including a number of pre-implementation conditions that have to be addressed. In relation to, in addition to drainage as well, which has been raised as a concern, and this relates to the drainage that comes on the service road down to the junction with Ramsbury Road.
And in conclusion?
In conclusion, I hope that officers and councillors accept the officer's recommendation and are prepared to support the application.
Thank you, Mr. Turville. We do have questions for you. Councillor Vickers, please, first.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Turville. You've referred to screening opinion. Are you referring to the 2020 screening opinion?
No, 2022. There's January 22. It's in the pack.
There's one in our papers 20/02892, which was for an asphalt.
That was a separate, that's not, I'm not referring to that one. I think Councillor Jones was referring to that one. There is a full opinion in the pack.
Okay.
Dated the 27th of January 2022.
Nevertheless, I'm interested because it's listed as part of the history.
Yes.
Whether the ultimate intention of your client is to develop this site, at least in part, for asphalt batching.
That application was withdrawn. I can't say whether he's going to be coming forward with that. And obviously it wouldn't preclude anybody else coming forward with a similar proposal anywhere else on the estate.
Sure.
And, you know, historically there was an asphalt plant up at Membury, close to the Walker's site.
Okay. That's useful background. Thank you. That was all I had.
Councillor House, thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much, Chairman. You made quite some points about traffic, and the traffic modelling is perfectly correct, and so on and so forth. The problem I have is the site visit, and you were at the
I was at the site visit,
and and I'm looking for your opinion, your comment on, given that the modelling is done when the service road is not meant to be used, but it is used heavily and consistently, how can it be a safe assessment that the traffic modelling is correct?
Mr. Dowding will be able to answer this, but Paul Goddard has looked at the data which include traffic counts. I don't know if the movements we saw on that day were representative of unlawful movements along the service road to access the M4. I don't know. Certainly at the times that I've been there, I've never seen it as busy.
So we just happened to go on a bad day.
No, well, you have to think, what did we see predominantly? Councillor Jones referred to hay. It was actually straw that was being moved on wagon and drags. And we must have seen 5 straw lorries go out in the course of that meeting. But that was probably the bulk of the traffic, was the straw traffic. Certainly of the bigger vehicles.
We'll come to debate later because I have my own observations.
Okay, but I mean, there is a condition that access out onto the motorway cannot be used, and Highways England have raised no objections to this application. There was a Highways England vehicle there when we were actually at the site meeting, as you know.
Okay, they'll come up in fate, I'm sure.
Okay, Councillor Barnett.
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Turver, I was one of the 3 that was present also.
Good, yeah. Excellent. Sorry, I didn't recognise you.
No, don't worry, that's all right. I recall actually seeing other vehicles
there were other vehicles.
and then the hay or straw lorries that you were, or other members have mentioned. You touched on this employment issue.
Yes.
Can you just elaborate whether full-time positions?
5 full-time staff, I think it's referred to in the design access.
Or shift or?
Daytime, not shift generally. There'll be normal working hours.
And hopefully, will they be local labour?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Turville. That's with no more questions.
Thank you. Shall I turn that off?
You can leave it on because Councillor Wollaston's is going to be coming up and doing a short up to the top, please, if you'd be kind. That's okay. You managed to get in here all right, so I'm sure you can get up there all right. See you in full flight. Councillor Wollaston, you know the presentation. 5 minutes when you're ready.
Thank you, Chairman, and good evening, members. This application is to replace the time expired approval consented in 2018. Members will recall the recent application for change of use on the old consent to B2 for the purposes of creating an asphalt plant, which was withdrawn because it's no longer an extant B8 planning consent. The easy option now would be to assume that this site was granted consent 4 years ago and that this committee should follow the same course. But the world has changed since then. Specifically, the Walker's site has been granted consent for a 10,000 square metre distribution unit. The level of HGV traffic on the B4000 has more than doubled, as shown not only in West Berkshire Council's own surveys, but an independent one commissioned by the Woodlanders Protection Group, a pressure group opposed to large-scale distribution unit development at Membury. This council declared a climate emergency in 2020, but this site, and indeed the whole Membury industrial estate, is recognised by our own highways officers as being unsustainable, with the barest possible level of public transport, 1 bus a day. and that well over 400 metres away along an unlit road. The level of development on the industrial estate has grown exponentially over this period, much of it open storage and involving large numbers of HG movements daily. This land was open green space in 2018, but those that went on the site inspection will have seen that bunds have been created to limit views of both large soil tips and heavy-duty machinery behind substantial gates with a large padlock on it. We now know that the developer's intention is to try to get consent for an asphalt plant. Although just outside of the nutrient neutrality zone for the Lamborn Valley, surface water runoff must either go into the Lamborn or down to the River Kennet. This site is outside the designated employment area and is part of the Northwest Downs area of outstanding natural beauty. And yet, since this previous consent expired, the applicants blatantly ignored this fact, removing topsoil and creating bunds using heavy machinery, presuming on the assumption that this consent will be approved. And to remind you, without any current planning approval. It is not even as if this application will generate significant local employment. 5, I think, has been mentioned. Membury Industrial Estate is an anomaly dating back to the Second World War and the subsequent use of this disused airfield. At over 14 kilometres as a round trip from junction 14 over the B4000, they're going to an undesignated road and finally onto a country lane with no public transport links. Nobody in their right minds would think of creating a designated employment area here. We had a blank sheet of paper today. However, we are where we are. In the light of climate change since 2018, in light of climate change since the 2018 consent and all the other factors I've highlighted, I can see absolutely no justification in allowing further industrial development beyond that already designated. And the applicant should be required to return the land to its original state to enforcement action necessary. The residents in my ward strongly feel that enough is enough. This application should be rejected.
Thank you, Councillor. Members, any questions of Councillor Wollaston? No. Thank you, Councillor, for that presentation. Members, that concludes all of the presentations on attendees and councillors. So it's now your opportunity to ask any questions of Mr. Brown or Mr. Dowding. Councillor Abs.
Thank you, Chairman. For Mr. Downing, I believe, as I've already mentioned, I have great concerns about the traffic. And what I'd really like you to do is talk me through the displays that are used on the new proposed junction and how, if traffic is not meant to be entering and exiting from the Membury service area, because that's an illegal move, you know, what kind of displays have we taken into account and why have we designed it in the way that we've designed it or has been designed?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Displays will be based upon the speed limit on the road, which is currently 40 as it's been reduced recently. So therefore, the display will be in the region of 2.4 by anything up to 120 metres, depending on what the 85th percentile speed recorded at the junction would be. There are set visibility displays for roads of different classes and of different speeds. So therefore, the display will be appropriate for speeds recorded at that junction if there's any doubt over the speeds.
Good. There was counting of cars done on that road, I believe. Was any speed noted of the cars? How often were they breaking this 40 mile per hour?
There was as part of the speed limit review for that road a couple of years ago, there was a speed survey undertaken along there. And in fact, although at the time it was a national speed limit, speeds were well within the sort of 30, 40 speed limit. In fact, it was quite reassuring that even though it was a national speed limit, cars were driving appropriately for the condition of the road. Hence why the 40 limit was proposed and accepted along that road at the time.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Culver.
Thank you, Chairman. Point 3.2 says an EIA screening exercise was undertaken and concluded the proposal is likely to have significant effects on the environment, Accordingly, the proposal is not considered EIA development. That to me seems confusing. So if you could elaborate on that, Mr. Brown, I'd be very grateful. Also, another point, should we not be waiting for the update of the local plan and what we intend to do long term for our employment areas? Because having read the Stantec report, it's clear that they say in there that we need more smaller sites in Newbury. It does make reference to the possibility that members should be given further consideration. But what is the status of that report at the moment? And will we be taking its conclusions into account in the new local plan? And should we not be waiting for that local plan to decide what we're going to do in the future with our employment areas in general? And this kind of decision ought to be addressed at that point in time. And thirdly, if I may, Chairman, under planning policy, it doesn't list our SUDS SPD as one of our considerations. I don't know if that's just an administrative oversight, but I'm quite concerned about the sustainable drainage section and about the representations that members of the public have made about the lack of assessment of cumulative impact, whether it be traffic or flooding. So if you've got any comment to make about the sustainable drainage and whether we ought to be doing some sort of cumulative exercise across the site rather than just looking at it in a sort of salami slicing exercise.
Mr. Brown, have you got those questions, or would you like the first question repeating?
No, that's fine.
Good.
I think I've got them.
In your own time. Thank you.
In respect to paragraph 3.2, I think it does say that a screening exercise has been undertaken, taking into account the selection criteria in Schedule 3 of the regulations, which concluded that the proposal is not likely to have significant effects on the environment.
It says likely. The proposal is likely to have significant effects on the environment.
There was a version of the report for the previous agenda for the previous meeting that did omit that word, but
okay, so that was a typo effectively
in the previous agenda report, but for this agenda report.
Well picked up, Cara.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Crawford. Second question.
Secondly, in terms of the local plan review, as members will be aware, that is currently going through its processes at the moment, and that has very limited weight in the decision making of this application. There are reports, as you refer to, the Stantec report assessing the need for additional B8, B2, B1 industrial space in the area. But at this point in time, any weight given to that report and the local plan review itself is limited due to the extent of its progression through the process, so to speak. And then finally, in terms of cumulative impacts and drainage, previously sustainable drainage was considered acceptable in the 2018 application. We are actually in this application seeking more detail than that the council previously considered necessary to ensure that any surface water drainage, surface water within the site is properly drained within the site, and therefore wouldn't have a cumulative impact with other sites in the wider Membury industrial estate. And in terms of traffic, the number of vehicle movements in comparison to the overall movements taking place currently are negligible, and it should be remembered that the Walker's application was approved when this previous permission was extant, and so that cumulative impact was taken into account at that time.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Are you happy with those answers, Councillor Cole? Thank you. Then we move on to Councillor Vickers.
Thank you, Chairman. My concern is over this situation that's been revealed this evening since the officer gave his report about the lack of enforcement of the restrictions on motorway access. Now, the consequence of that is if it's regularly being ignored by the Highways Agency, then of course, business people who are looking for storage and distribution applications are going to be honing in on this site, because why not? You've got immediate access to a motorway.
The question is...
So my question is that something that we should discount when we're deciding this particular application, because it seems to be denying the facts on the ground? And what are we going to do about it? Maybe outside of planning as a council to make sure that this is enforced.
Well, this was a question I was going to ask at the end of the session, but I thought members should have first go. My concern is the same as, do we take no notice of that being outside the red line and the fact that the law effectively is being broken on that emergency road, and it does or it doesn't affect our thinking on this application this evening? Mr. Dowdy.
I think I'll ask Mr. Brown to answer that, because it's outside of as a highway authority for us to do anything, because it's a private road and private access.
Thank you. Mr. Brown.
It is National Highways, formerly referred to as Highways England, responsibility to police that service road. And in terms of any enforcement action, the council has the ability to take enforcement action should there be a breach of condition taking place, potentially in respect of the Membury service area. I do not have that information, but overall, that is not a consideration for the determination of this application today.
That is my concern. I don't want the evening spent discussing the emergency slip road and leading us down a decision, which really is something we unfortunately shouldn't be considering. It's outside of this application. It's other people's responsibility. It's a terrible situation, but if we could just focus our minds maybe away from that emergency slip road. But thank you, Councillor Vickers, for bringing that up and the clarification from our officers. Thank you. Councillor Bennyworth.
Thank you, Chairman. And just on that very point, and I think I'm correct, that would be a civil matter, wouldn't it, Mr. Brown, regarding access to the slip road? And that would be an agreement between the applicant and the National Highways.
That is correct.
That's correct. And also just a point of interest, I know that part of the world very well. Didn't make the site meeting, but there we are. The no entry for the services is as that road joins the services. Again, that's correct, isn't it, Mr. Brown?
Yes, that's correct. Yes.
Thank you very much. Another point, Chairman, if I may, please. Mr. Brown, how much weight ought to be placed on the employment benefits from this application, and does that offset the sustainability or lack of sustainability of the site?
Chairman, a significant weight should be placed on the economic benefits of the proposal. This council is supporting economic development through its development plan. As set out in my presentation and in the agenda report, overall, the development is considered to be sustainable development when looked in around, taking into account that economic, environmental and social considerations.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Any more questions, Councillor?
Chairman, no, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Brown.
Councillor Wilson, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Can I go back to the sustainability issue? On both the Walkers application, I think from memory, the Hunt Kennels application, I think as Mr. Goddard said, the location was unsustainable environmentally. I'm just wondering why this one is so different, particularly if you look at the fact that Walkers were promising 200 jobs as opposed to, I think, the 6 that's on offer here. Why is it different?
Mr. Brown.
Chairman, I cannot really comment on the comments of a highways officer, but from a planning officer's point of view, as I mentioned, taking into account in the round the 3 threads of sustainability set out by national government, this application is considered to be sustainable.
Councillor Willison, you want to come back?
No, thank you, Chairman. I'm just amazed.
Thank you. Councillor Abbs.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chairman. Question for Mr. Brown. As a member here, I'm often told that we must consider what's in front of us and nothing else. So yet, except for you can't ignore the traffic that goes by, and we can't really ignore the state of the current site. Where exactly? And therefore, the fact there's a 2018 application now extant, I'm also putting that aside. So, but I want clarification on what I'm actually trying to judge. An area of outstanding natural beauty, which is as it's supposed to be, moving to a B8, or am I actually looking at the site as it exists today, where planning enforcement wasn't due and so done rather? And going to, I guess, a BA again, is it? So going backwards almost.
So the application seeks permission for a BH use on the site. The site currently has no authorised use other than the previous one that was granted, but that has now expired. So you are assessing the application from a nil use, sometimes referred to as an agricultural use, being as it was a field, to a BH use, not from what may appear to be taking place on site.
So fine, that's fine. So if we reject this, I assume enforcement will go along and return it to what we should be looking at, which is a field.
That'll be a decision for the council outside of this meeting.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry, Chairman, I did have one. I'm struggling with the displays still, and I wonder if do the officers have a diagram showing the plan showing the displays of the new, especially of the new entrance, please.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Have you got that one?
I'm sure it's in the pack somewhere, but I haven't got a paperback. Well, thank you very much. So this is what I'm hoping to be shown. Thank you. Could someone zoom in on it, please? And can you confirm that those displays are designed to let traffic go in and out, left and right?
Mr. Chairman, if I may, yes, I can confirm that those displays have been approved by the Highway Authority for traffic going out to the left. Obviously, there shouldn't be any traffic going out to the right because there is no access out onto the M4 at that point.
But do you agree that that display shows?
That display would enable a vehicle to turn right and have the correct visibility for that if it was required for whatever reason to turn right out of there.
So I guess then it becomes, are we allowed to approve something that would be illegal?
A vehicle could potentially turn right, park up, do a U-turn and then go down the road. The fact is the illegal manoeuvre will be exiting out onto the M4.
Not getting into semantics.
That display would encourage it.
Let's not get into semantics. We've had the answer there. Thank you. Mr. Councillor Barnett.
Thank you, Chairman. I might be straying again about this road network. Am I right and correct in hearing early on Mr. Dowding mentioning about speed along this particular road, speed checks? Yeah, we've just been told, to my understanding, it's a private or highways responsible.
Well, we covered that. We covered that, I think, of Mr. Dowding's answer earlier, but you've given another.
Yes, thank you, Chair. If I could just confirm, I may have mistaken you. I gave you a speed check on the Ramsby Road, not on the private access road.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Woodson, your hand's up. Is that an old hand or you've got another question, have you? Okay. Put your hand down, Councillor. So it's trying to, yeah, okay. Members, that's all the questions done. It's now open to debate. Anybody like to start this discussion with regards to this application? Thank you, Councillor Abs. Get the ball rolling.
Yeah, well, so nobody else seems to want to. Yeah, this is a very odd application. And it's one of the reasons I said right at the beginning, I prefer people to visit and for it to have been deferred because there are so many question marks about what the real situation is there. We're hearing about the suppressed traffic numbers being something like 30% out, but we don't really have an explanation as to, how that fits into any kind of data set that we can rely on. We were told that, okay, yeah, we have measured the speed, but now we've just been told, no, we haven't measured the speed. And certainly on the day, I was surprised when the officer said it was all, between 30 and 40 because they were going by us at the meeting a lot faster than that. So why? Because actually it's a reasonable straight run from Memory Services itself down that service road. And so I absolutely get that, we can be looking at an accident. And the fact that I'm looking at displays that actively encourage turning right and into an illegal, I'm really uncomfortable basically supporting anything that really shouldn't be there. I'm not even commenting on the fact that we shouldn't even be looking at toppings and all sorts of stuff that were on the site. I'm just referring to the lack of information I have, the lack of clarity I have about what really is happening on that site. And therefore, I'm very much minded to, I would have preferred to have deferred and collected the information. But if in the absence of being able to do that, I'll let someone else propose that we don't accept officers' recommendations. But I'm very nervous about doing it because of the amount of information.
My only advice, I think, and I'll be corrected if I'm wrong, but we go very careful about looking at a refusal on the grounds of a road that we shouldn't be considering.
Well, no, but we can refuse on the basic on design of the entrance and exit because they are not according to what should be happening with that traffic, and that's on the site.
Well,
it's not
according
off the
to
site.
Highways, not for you and I to get into a debate, but as submitted according to Highways, they say that is correct. Anyway, Councillor Vickers.
Yes, Chairman. I can't see a reason not to support officers' recommendations. However, I'm extremely unhappy about the situation we're looking at up at the memory employment area for reasons I've already raised, Chairman, that fall outside planning. I mean, there is a case to be had for allowing motorway service areas to become hubs for distribution and storage, but that is not the law of the land at the moment. And if it was, then we would have a major additional planning issue to look at. But so long as we, as a planning authority, have to look at the situation as it should be and not as it is, then we're basically stuck. And I can't see anything in planning law that's happened since the 2018 application was approved. No, I can't see any significant material change in the planning law environment. Okay, we've declared a climate emergency since then, but we don't have yet even a Regulation 19 published local plan that gives significant weight to whatever might be in there. And most of us don't know what is in that draft, although some of us have been on the behind closed doors meetings that have been looking at what officers have been coming up with. So, and I did draw attention also to the fact that it's in our papers that there looks to be an intention of the applicant to go beyond just a mere change of use and storing stuff to actually operating an asphalt plant, which is noisy, polluting, and would generate far more traffic than a mere change of use. But I think we have to look at it just as a change of use. And if it comes forward as an application, again, for asphalt plant, then that will be taken at that time. So I'm not going to propose at this stage officers' recommendations, but that's the way I see it, colleagues, through you, Chairman. I think we have great difficulty, as the Chairman has said, in doing anything other than supporting officers' recommendations. But I do think there should be something in the minutes that says we have great concerns about the way Membury Service Station is being, the use of the highways into and out of it are being enforced by the Highways England.
Thank you. Thank you. I think Councillor Bennyworth was next, were you not?
Chairman, I think Councillor Williston was.
His hands up, and I thought I saw yours go up first. I'll take you first.
First. Thank you very much. I'm almost reluctantly, I think, going to agree with Councillor Vickers on the point that he made. My feeling is that the previous decision still stands. And we've heard also from Mr. Brown about the employment benefits and how heavily the weight that we ought to put on those. And for those reasons, I shall be supporting officer's recommendation.
Good. That's not a proposal, or is it a proposal?
I'm happy for the debate to go further, Chairman.
Thank you. Good. Yeah. Okay. Councillor Williston, apologies.
No problem, Chairman. Surely the issue here is that we are going from a site which is in the area of outstanding natural beauty with agricultural use to an industrial use. And that, to my way of thinking, is a perfectly good reason why we should reject officers' recommendations. Can I just also add a further factor into the equation in that Highways England have just given consent to an operator on Membury Industrial Estate to access through the service station. I think that could well be the thin end of the wedge.
Thank you. Councillor Culver.
Thank you, Chairman. It's been pointed out to us by officers that we shouldn't think about what's going to come in the future in terms of the local plan and so on and so forth, and we should just focus on what we've got in front of us now. Well, the fact is it's not in the employment area. So it begs the question, at what point do we stop saying, oh, well, it's near it, so it's acceptable, let's just do it. And the same applies to the cumulative impact as well. It really, really concerns me that when we've got something like that, it's similar to the LRIE, you know, there need to be cumulative impact assessments. We can't just chop something up into bits and look at it individually. I mean, it says in here that the local flood authority hasn't given a response, and there's insufficient details provided to ensure that surface water will be managed in a sustainable manner. So yes, you could say, well, that's addressed by a condition, but you know, at what point do we as an authority stop saying, oh, it's fine, we'll just impose some conditions, but we're not going to do anything in terms of making cumulative assessments? I feel really, really uncomfortable with this approach that we take. So I am inclined to oppose this evening.
Okay, just consider, members, if you do consider refusal on this, what the reasons of refusal are, considering that this application has been approved previously, and quite a bit of the discussion we've had this evening is outside of our remit anyway. But we move on. Councillor Cant.
Thank you, Chair. Relatively briefly, I think I concur with Councillor Vickers and Councillor Bennyworth on the fact that there seems very little realistic basis to refuse this. I would just like to come back though to the issue about the AONB and ask Mr. Brown just to confirm categorically that that's not an overriding issue that should prevent this application being considered or being successful.
I'll just finish the debate first and to what Councillor Barnett's got to say.
Well, Chairman, members, I have got a lot more to say than what's already been said around the table, and I feel very much in the same sort of vein of mine and what's just been said by Councillor Councillor Bennyworth and Councillor Vickers. You know, I feel very uneasy about it, but I feel that we are in some difficulty in identifying exact position if we are going to reject it, and it could be a case of coming back to haunt us at a later stage. So from that point, you know, I do feel very uneasy, but I feel that it's a
Thank you. I will come back now to Councillor Cant's question. Mr. Brown.
Thank you, Chairman. In respect of the loss of a field within the AONB, this council has already decided in 2018 that loss of a field for a B8 use was acceptable, and there was not sufficient adverse impact on the character and appearance of the area in the AONB to justify refusing it at that time. I think it would be very difficult to defend such a reason for refusal at appeal this time, given the previous decision of the council. And in fact, the landscaping that is being secured this time has been increased from the previous permission. So I would advise members against such a reason for refusal.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Councillor Cant, come back.
Just to say thank you for the explanation, and Chair, I would like on that basis to propose that we move forward to accept the officer's recommendations, subject to conditions.
Does there have a second?
I'm happy to second that, and I think we do have stronger conditions this time than we had in 2018 on landscaping, on ecology and on drainage. And I think in a way we should be grateful that we have that chance to toughen up the conditions.
In our discussion, I didn't pick up any additional conditions. Anybody, a bit late now, but I think we're quite happy with those conditions. Councillor Williston.
Could we have it informative, perhaps? I can't be a condition, I'm sure, that any change to B2 would not be acceptable.
Mrs. Armour.
I think there's probably one more for planning, but I'm not sure that's an appropriate as an informative, but obviously that has been recorded in the minutes, and I don't know if Mr. Chills.
Mr. Brown, can you help us?
I wouldn't consider it appropriate in the informative. I think in the minutes would be sufficient. Any B2 use would need to come through planning.
Okay. So, members, we've had a good debate. Councillor Abs, yeah?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Obviously, one of the things I said I'm very nervous about is encouraging illegal movements of traffic. So can we condition at least the displays or the entrance to be sorted into a more legal format.
There is a condition about access. I don't know if you've seen it.
But indeed, but on the plan, it specifically shows.
Are you concerned about the display line going down to the service station?
I don't see why there would need to be one if traffic's never allowed down there, or coming from there for that matter.
Or a sign saying don't turn right? I'm
asking
I'm
for-
not a highways officer. I'm planning on the hoof here. Mr. Downard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, there is always, of course, the chance that traffic will be going down there because it is an emergency access from the service area and to the service area. So it may not be traffic associated with the development, but it might be traffic associated with the motorway service area and or the police. So therefore, display would still be required.
No, I think what Councillor Abt was saying is coming out of the site, turning right. Are you saying there could be an ambulance that's coming out of the site? There's an accident on the site, and therefore it will want to turn right.
No, we're saying is that the display to the right needs to be there because a vehicle that will be turning even left needs to look to the right to check there's nothing coming down the road towards it before it turns left.
Okay. Right. I think we've run that to ground. Okay, so I have a proposer, Councillor Cant. I have a seconder, Councillor Vickers, and the recommendation is for Head of Planning and Countryside be authorised to grant planning permission for this application on the land adjacent to the M4 Membry airfield. And this is the change of use to Class 8. And I'll ask Mrs. Armour to carry out the vote, please.
Okay, so those in favour of the proposal, which is for approval, can you raise your hands? So I'll make that 5. And those against? 3 against. So that proposal was carried then.
Thank you. Thank you. Mrs. Jones, thank you very much for coming along this evening. Mr. Turville, thank you for coming along for your presentations this evening. Have I covered everyone? I think I have. So we now move on to the second application this evening, which is, thank you, Mr. Rabaki, and thank you very much. I missed you out. Thank you. The second application is Lake House at West Woodey, application 22-01843, Stroke House. And again, this has come to committee due to more than 10 letters of objection. And the officer making the presentation this evening is Mr. Brown. Over to you, Mr. Brown. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chairman. This application was submitted seeking the approval for amendments to the plans approved under Condition 3 of Permission 18/1441/House. That was granted for the demolition of a garden store, external alterations to the Eastern Pavilion, including the provision of roof lights, erection of a new Western Pavilion to provide home office facilities at ground level and guest accommodation at first floor level, and the basement level garage. The applicant has appealed against non-determination of this application as a decision was not made by the council by the agreed deadline. Therefore, this item seeks members' resolution to make representations at that appeal that planning permission should be granted subject to conditions, together with the delegated authority to negotiate or amend those conditions during the course of the appeal if required. The amendments to the previous permission granted are set out in paragraph 1.3 of the agenda report, which include changes to the previously approved fenestration of the Eastern and Western Pavilions, and enlargement of the previously approved basement located below the driveway in front of the main dwelling. A previous application to alter the fenestration of the Eastern Pavilion only from that previously approved was refused and dismissed at appeal for the reasons set out in the inspector's decision letter provided on pages 59 to 62 of the agenda report. In summary, the inspector concluded that the changes to the Eastern Pavilion would appear well related to the main dwelling and would have an acceptable impact on the character and appearance of the area and would conserve the natural beauty of the OMB. However, the inspector did consider that as no technical information was provided to demonstrate that the impact of light spill from the existing pavilion would be comparable to that if the proposed changes were to occur, they were unable to conclude that the development would preserve the sense of remoteness, tranquility, and dark night skies in the OMB. It was on that basis only that the appeal was dismissed. We have a slide here showing the proposed block plan. The previous granted permission basement outline is shown in a black dashed line here. And the proposed enlarged altered basement in this application is shown in the dashed red outline. Here we have a view of the existing main dwelling with the eastern pavilion to the left-hand side and the space to the right-hand side where the western pavilion would be and the start of the basement works. We have a side elevation of the existing main dwelling with the eastern pavilion in the background and the area where the western pavilion would be located in the foreground. This is the rear of the main dwelling with some of the landscaping that's been implemented as a result of the approval of the permissions related to the main dwelling. Here is a rear view of the existing eastern pavilion on the site. And another side view of the existing eastern pavilion on the site. And a close-up front view of the existing eastern pavilion on the site. And finally, a south side elevation view of the existing eastern pavilion on site. This plan shows the previously approved basement floor plan with the main dwelling to the bottom of the picture and the basement that was previously approved by the council outlined in red. This is the now proposed basement floor plan with the previous approval in the red dashed line. This was the previously approved eastern pavilion. You'll see there are roof lights previously approved, but the front or west elevation of it proposed barn style doors. And now we have the proposed eastern pavilion, where the barn style doors are replaced with glazing and alterations to the fenestration on the sides. And again, we have the previously approved western pavilion with the barn style doors that opened out but had windows behind. And now the proposed western pavilion for consideration today. This plan shows the approved section of the basement and the proposed section of the basement. And again, this plan shows a different section view of the previously approved and the proposed basement. The principle of the development proposed was established under the previously approved application. The proposed variations to the approved scheme in this application do not alter the size or height of either of the pavilions from that previously approved. The proposed changes to the fenestration in both the eastern and western pavilions would have an acceptable effect on the character and appearance of the area, and the changes to the design and appearance would conserve the natural beauty of the OMB, as previously considered by the inspector. In respect of the proposed basement, no part of the basement will be visible above ground. The proposed car lift from the driveway forecourt of the western pavilion to the basement will be located in approximately the same location as that previously approved, and will be finished in the same material as that used on the driveway. Therefore, there would be no visual impact on the OMB as a result of the proposed changes to the approved basement scheme, including its enlargement. In respect of light pollution, a lighting assessment has been submitted, which concludes that light spillage from the amended fenestration proposed would be limited to areas immediately surrounding each of the pavilions, falling away to below 0.5 lux within a short distance from the pavilions. The lighting assessment advises that it was undertaken on the basis of a worst case scenario, where no window coverings were considered in the calculations for light levels. Window coverings which are likely to be used would therefore reduce light levels further. This technical information that was absent in the consideration of the appeal by the inspector demonstrates a negligible increase in light pollution from the current baseline. Therefore, the changes in fenestration proposed to both pavilions are not considered to detrimentally impact on dark skies of the AOMB. In respect of drainage, subject to a condition securing appropriate surface water drainage and reuse of water within the site where possible, the lead local flood authority raises no objections. A number of representations received raised concern regarding the impact of traffic, in particular HGVs, and the highway safety as a result of the proposed development. Whilst the proposed changes to the appearance of the pavilions is not considered to introduce any significant traffic or impact on highway safety, the increase in the size of the proposed basement has the potential to result in an increase in the associated number of HGV movements during excavation works, due to the increased volume of spoil that will need to be removed. A spoil condition was attached to the previous permission granted, and it is considered that whilst there may be some additional movements of HGVs as a result of the increased volume of spoil from the enlarged basement, that can be adequately controlled by condition. Landscaping and ecological mitigation measures in accordance with the previous permission granted would be secured by condition, together with details of works close to the main gas pipeline. There would be no long-term impact on neighbouring amenity. Representations received also raised concerns regarding the potential future use of the property for commercial purposes. Should the applicant wish to use the property for purposes other than as a single residential dwelling, planning permission would be required, and the impact of that proposed development would be considered in a determination of such an application. A potential future use of the property other than for its current authorised permitted use as a residential dwelling is not a material consideration in the determination of this application. The proposal is considered to have limited economic considerations beyond the immediate construction period. The environmental considerations have been assessed in terms of design, amenity and impact on the area. Social considerations overlap those of environmental in terms of amenity, and having assessed the application in terms of design, impact on the area and impact on neighbouring amenity, the development is considered to represent sustainable development. The purpose of this item is to determine the council's position at the appeal. For the reasons given in the agenda, officers recommend that members delegate to the Service Director of Development and Regulation to make representations at appeal that planning permission should be granted, subject to the conditions set out in the agenda and update sheet, together with the delegated authority to negotiate or amend those conditions during the course of the appeal where necessary. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. I understand Mr. Dowding at this stage doesn't wish to make any representation on highways, but he's happy to ask any questions of officers later on in the evening. So we now come on to the presentations again by our attendees, and our parish councillors this evening, or the parish council this evening is Councillor Simon Hayes from West Woodey. Councillor Hayes, good evening, sir. Nice to see you. Thank you for coming along. You've seen the format so far, and I'm sure you've made presentation to this committee previously. If not, best of luck. You have 5 minutes. 4 minutes, I'll give you some indication. And then, as I said previously, 10 seconds, I'll say, and in conclusion, should you require it. So when you're ready, Councillor Hayes, thank you.
West Woodey Parish meeting with the original support of the Parish Council of Inkpen, Kintbury, Hampstead Marsh and East Woodey all opposed the original planning of this.
Could you pull the microphone just a little bit more towards you? Think that's better.
I got my seconds back.
It's okay. Don't worry. Carry on. I'll look after you.
Thank you. The underground element of this planning application incorporates a wellness centre, a third swimming pool, no less, with 5 loos, a large car park, and a development of 1,500 square metres. In 2019, the planning was granted for a smaller underground car park. This new planning seeks development 3 times bigger than what was previously approved. It is 5 times the footprint of the main residence itself, and no thought has been given to the amount of spoil and the traffic that will be taken off the site if this development goes through. Prior to the application of the approval of the smaller underground car park in 2019, at a meeting to push this over the line, the agents Carter Jonas, the AMOB team, and the planning team agreed in writing, and I quote, "We have reduced the size of the basement and replaced the ramp to the basement parking with a car lift. These changes have reduced the footprint and built form of the building, which, as we agreed at the April site meeting, will in turn reduce the impact on the AOB. So why are the planning team now recommending approval given this point? They have not consulted with the AONB again, and now we find the council recommending approval for a development 3 times bigger than what was previously agreed with them. So what has changed? Nothing. On the drainage issues, Lake House is built on a bog. The effects of excavating 7 metres below the surface are still unresolved. Drainage reports issued by the applicant relate primarily to the site itself and not upstream where the village is. And the report itself makes no primary mention of the 3 neighbouring houses with boreholes. The ONB in 2019 and your drainage expert in 2022 have both publicly stated that it is the water level upstream that is the issue. So why are you ignoring your experts' interests, experts' opinions? Lessons need to be learned from the disastrous effects in and around Victoria Park a few years ago with all the water pumping for the development there. And we note comments asking why the village hasn't commissioned an independent report. Why should we? We aren't the ones wrecking the environment. On light pollution, the applicant is once again seeking permission to remove the garage doors on both the east and the west pavilions and replace them with large French windows all around the buildings, which incidentally he did months ago anyway. This amendment was firstly refused by the planning team and secondly refused of appeal by the planning inspectorate, who stated that the change would preserve the sense of remoteness, tranquility and dark night skies in the North Wessex AONB. Even with the very minor amendments recommended to the size of the windows, this makes very little difference, and the application should be refused again on the same grounds. This site can be seen from roads and bridleways locally and can be seen clearly at night from Wayfarers Walk up on the Downs, lit up like a Christmas tree. No other houses like this, not even Highclere Castle. So it's all very well producing local lighting reports for individual buildings. So lighting can be approved on an individual basis, but it is the total accumulation of light pollution at the property which is the problem. And I ask if anybody from the council or any councillor has visited the roads around the property when it's dark. Like us, you would be horrified because the entire property can be lit up with more to come apparently.
1 minute.
Trees all around the property, and I have a photograph to prove it, but I'm not allowed to tell you that. When refusing the appeal in 2022, the Bristol Planning Inspectorate had a very valid point in saying, we need to preserve the sense of remoteness, tranquility and dark night skies. So why are you going against this? We've had good support from our ward councillors, but we need your support to defend our village. Some of you are meant to have strong links with the countryside. Others have green credentials. So why would you support a project which is now totally out of control, already an environmental disaster, against the wishes of ordinary people who are apparently your voters? That's it.
Thank you, Councillor Hayes. Just 1 minute. Any questions, members of council? We do. Councillor Abbs, thank you.
Yeah, just a quick one, please. Good evening. You mentioned in your very nice speech there something about French windows already being replaced.
Yes, they've already been done, but
so there should be enforcement going on here. Is that
well,
what
there's never any enforcement.
But so how many have already been replaced?
Can I ask my technical advisor?
I don't think you're allowed to do that, but it's chairman's call.
All the windows that have been proposed for changing have apparently been changed.
Thank you.
Councillor Benniwer.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Hayes, thank you very much for your presentation. Could you tell me, has there been any impact on the upstream houses for the development thus far?
Well, not yet. They haven't dug the car park, have they?
No, I appreciate that, but there's been nothing.
Nobody's talked to us about it.
Okay, thank you very much.
Apparently you're meant to talk to us about it. Well, you're not, but they are.
Thank you.
I think we've concluded all of our questions. I've got nobody else wanting any questions. Thank you very much, Councillor Hayes, for your presentation this evening. Members, we have no objectors here this evening and no supporters, but we do have the agent, and I'll just ask Mr. Senscall to come up to the lecture. Thank you. Mr. Sen, a bit of clarification. We were expecting Mr. Neagle this evening to be on Zoom. We can't seem to locate him. Can you help us, or are you going to push on?
So yes, I'm here instead of Mr. Neagle.
Oh, so it's one or the other?
It's one or the other. I was supposed to be at a planning appeal in Suffolk, which was settled yesterday, so I can now come here instead. So Mr. Neagle's been stood down.
Okay, that's clarified that. Thank you very much. You know the format, and I'm sure you've done this many times before, but just for clarification, 5 minutes. I'll give you a shout with a minute to go, and then in conclusion with 10 seconds. We look forward to your presentation.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, members, this is a strange application before you today in that we have appealed against non-determination by this council. The application was submitted in July of last year. We spent a long time discussing and negotiating with your officers in a very positive way. We dealt with concerns expressed by the Drainage Authority about the initial reports that were submitted. We produced detailed reports in respect of the lighting issue. All those matters were resolved, but we couldn't get the application to committee. Our client therefore decided to appeal against non-determination. And it was after that appeal that we've got the officer's report, which is very thorough in my view, and which clearly recommends that if the application had been before you, the recommendation would have been for approval. It's now going to appeal, and quite rightly, the officer is saying, well, that's the position, but as officers, their view is that the application is acceptable, and therefore that's the position that the council should be taking when it gets to appeal and when an inspector decides how this application should be determined. The last speaker made reference to a lot of matters which, frankly, don't relate to the current proposal. We know that local people have a particular view about the scheme, but the existing house is lawful. It has planning permission. We have a consent for the West Pavilion. We have a consent for the East Pavilion. We're looking to simply change some of the details around that to make both pavilions symmetrical and to read as a piece along with the house. Yes, we are increasing the size of the basement significantly. We don't deny that. That's underground works. In terms of the AONB, there is no visual impact on the AONB as a result of the enlarged basement. Yes, there will be more sport to take away. That is a short-term issue in terms of the construction period only. Thereafter, that issue goes away. Your officers have had regard to that factor and are happy that it is a construction issue. It's a temporary matter. Once the development is approved, it goes away. Nothing else to say, I don't think, Chair, other than that, very good report, very comprehensive report, and I would hope that you will accept your officers' recommendations and determine that you would have supported the application had it been before you for determination.
Thank you, Mr. Sensible. Just 1 minute. We do have a question for you from Councillor Vickers.
Thank you, Mr. Sensible. You referred to the fact that it took a long time to determine and you couldn't bring it to committee. It was on the committee agenda and then pulled at the last minute. I can't remember whether it was 3 weeks ago or 6 weeks ago, but I was given to understand that was because we weren't able to get permission for a site visit. So that's hardly our fault if the owner won't allow us to visit the site, because clearly you need to see it, especially new members who've not been aware of the whole saga.
Councillor, with respect, we submitted the appeal in July. It was pulled from the last committee because there was an access issue, but we'd already appealed by then.
You'd already appealed before
that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any more questions, members? No. Thank you, Mr. Sensible.
Thank you, Chair.
Those will now come on to our ward members, Councillor Cole and Councillor Rolls. Now, members, I have given a little dispensation here to both Councillor Cole and Councillor Rolls for Councillor Cole to make a declaration, and I think when he's made that declaration, it'd be clear why, and also an explanation given by Councillor Claire Rolls as to her position with regards to attendance at the meeting tonight. So with your patience, firstly, I will ask Councillor Cole for his declaration of interest. Councillor Cole.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm the owner of land around about half the site. I do not consider this development is necessarily to my financial detriment, could actually be to my financial advantage. if not to the environment's advantage. Nevertheless, Nolan principles apply. I am comfortably within all of them. I'm happy to enlarge on that should anybody wish.
Thank you, Councillor Cole. Councillor Rolls.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, as members know, I'm a member of Western Area Committee. I just wanted to clarify that I am awaiting clarification on a technical point relating to voting at committees before I'm able to rejoin you as colleagues and sit on committees and vote. So I just wanted to clarify that point.
Thank you, Councillor Rolls. I won't be asking any questions, so we'll now start the 5 minutes and Councillor Rolls will take the first presentation. Thank you. I'm not taking any questions on that. We've had the submission. I've given that dispensation. I don't want to go into discussion at this stage. What did you not hear?
You want me to repeat what I said? Perhaps this doesn't quite get up high enough.
It's very tall.
I made reference to my view that the Nolan principles apply, and I feel that I am completely comfortably within all of them.
Yeah, sorry, I thought you were going to open up for questions, and I'm not going to take any questions. So when you're ready, Councillor Rolls, I will start the clock. Rennie.
Thank you, Chair. Members, there is a great deal of interest in this application. It's not often that we see not one, but 5 parish councils who immediately border the site object to an application. The constant theme across all 5 parish councils is overdevelopment within the AONB. I was surprised to learn that officers were satisfied that a site visit could be replaced by photographs. We're not willing to defer the application to allow for a site visit, particularly given the weight of the parish council opinion and objections raised. And particularly given the scale of the operation which seems to be going on at this site. I visited it this morning with Councillor Cole, and it was only through walking around the parameter of the site that you can fully appreciate the scale and impact of the overall development. The proposed alterations, which seek to include more windows, would seem to be contrary to preserving the sense of remoteness, tranquility and dark night skies of the North Wessex Downs AONB that was a basis for dismissing the last appeal. I also question why there has not been a full up-to-date ecology report. In 3.1 of the report, it says, however, taking into account the selection criteria in Schedule 3 of the EIA regulations, it's not considered that the proposal is likely to have significant effects on the environment. Really? Schedule 3 refers to size accumulation with other development and natural resources. This is to be an enormous additional damage to a natural bog in the AONB, and an EIA should have been required. My final comment relates to retrospective consent. I sat on Western Area Committee not so long ago when we had an application for retrospective consent. I recall the leader of this council stating this is not how we do planning in West Berkshire. I note that there is an element within this application for retrospective consent relating to the roof lights, and indeed not the first time that retrospective consent has been sought when you look at the planning history on this site. Thank you.
Thank you. 3 minutes, Councillor Cole.
Chairman, quickly some procedural stuff on the photos front. You refused us additional photos. In any test of reasonableness, that alone appears to be reason for judicial review should this application be recommended to the appeal people for approval. 6.6 on page 44. You think that this is within the remit of a section 73A application. So you think that adding in a gigantic additional basement area is minor? I don't get it. They want a vast increase in basement, vast amounts of windows and resulting light spillage. At 6.15 and 6.16, you tell us the changes in fenestration proposed to both pavilions are not considered to detrimentally impact on the dark skies of the AONB. Does this mean that you are happy that the thing already lights up the night sky, way beyond the proverbial Christmas tree that our friend over there already used? That's what happens when they choose to actually turn the lights on. But you didn't permit us to send in photos. 6.19 and 20 are interesting. You're telling us that because we don't really know where the groundwater will be affected by these massive diggings, it's okay to go ahead. That's as I read it. Talk about neighbouring amenity. You've already heard that this thing's visible from Waver Harrows Walk up on the Downs. That's just when park lighting is on. Of course, this application will further affect that. You tell us the construction period won't affect the neighbours. I take it there'll be no piling then. Last time, the piling went for a very long time, and I could hear it even where I live. Well, I'm not next to this thing. And this stuff about the spoil removal I've picked up along the way.
1 minute.
I guess it wouldn't matter if they had 100 million tons to take out. It'd still be okay, would it? It wouldn't. Spoil removal, yeah, I'm on that too. If this abomination does get let through, last time they wanted to clear spoil, they reopened the original gates illegally. Please don't permit this time. What's with the Thames Water stuff? You're quoting Thames Water. If they are on Thames Water, do tell me, is this just a ridiculous private overdevelopment that's already damaged the environment and will only do more damage if this goes through? Or is it the long-term project that will additionally create a spa hotel? I know you're not allowed to consider it. And the conditions...
And in conclusion?
The conditions will stop that this time around, but this is another stepping stone along the way. Whatever the answer, whichever way it is, this is not protecting the AONB.
Thank you, Councillor Cole. Excellent timing. Members, any questions, please? We do. Councillor Bennyworth.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, councillors, colleagues, ward colleagues, I should say. I was probably a little premature in my question to Mr. Hayes, but would you care to comment on the effect that this may have on upstream properties, please?
Councillor Cole, you might not be able to answer that. You're not a drainage man, so don't just speculate. If you don't know the answer, which I doubt if you do.
I don't, but then the tests haven't been done. So how could I know?
And those, if I may, Chairman, those properties are, I'm led to believe, bore fed. Is that correct?
The owners of boreholes are much more worried about the boreholes. Yes. The village is on varying different supplies. My bit happens to be on Thames Water, as it happens, but it is the only bit, hence my curiosity about Thames Water being mentioned in this document. Didn't appear to be relevant. But I know I can't give you a straight answer. How could I?
Okay. No, thank you, Sean.
Thank you, Councillor Paddy. Any more questions? Nope. All done. Thank you both very much for your presence. We do. Councillor Abbs, where are you? Can't see you on the screen.
Sorry, I hadn't put my hand up. The physical one up instead.
That's
what was the confusing bit. Both of you have sat on this committee in the past. May do it again shortly.
Will again.
Yeah, well, sometime at the point. I'm curious as to if you were to refuse it as a member of the panel, what conditions would you choose to refuse it on?
It's quite clear to us that the light aspect is not dealt with. It's quite clear to us, and therefore we have an AONB policy where this does not preserve our AONB policy. Quite frankly, what's been done already does not preserve it. Well, why make it worse?
Can I just add, I would be relying on what was said at the last appeal, which was basically the point I read out, which, if I just find it in my notes, proposed alterations which seek more windows, contrary to preserving the sense of remoteness, tranquility and dark skies of the North Wessex AONB. That was the basis for dismissing, or one of the bases for dismissing the last appeal. So I'm not sure why that doesn't apply now.
No, thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you, councillors. No more questions. Now, members, your opportunity to ask any clarification of maybe Mr. Dowding with regards to spoil and moving of soil, or Officer Mr. Brown on his presentation on the application before us. We do. Councillor Culver's up first.
Thank you, Chairman. I have a few questions, if I may. It says in here that there's 2 other applications at the moment that are under consideration. And I'm just wondering why we aren't looking at those at the same time, because it would seem appropriate. So it talks about installation of 2 ponds and retrospective permission for the retention of an existing pond and extension of residential curtilage on page 33, awaiting determination. I just wonder why we're not looking at those at the same time. Talks about the tree officer's recommendation. Could I ask, has a tree officer actually visited the site? I have made my own visit down there in lieu of us having site visits, and I'm a bit concerned about what has already happened with trees on the site. So I'd be grateful to know, have they actually attended and looked at it themselves? And the third question that I would ask, it makes reference to SIL payments. Can I ask, would a hotel be liable to SIL? And if so, would the rate of SIL be different to the rate for a residential property?
Sailing a bit close to the wind here, Councillor Calder. Mr. Brown.
Chairman, in terms of the 2 other applications, those are not in a current state to be brought to committee should they be required to be brought to committee. We've had to bring this one to committee as soon as possible due to the fact that a non-determination appeal has been lodged. And so the council needs to prepare its position in respect to that appeal promptly to accord with the planning inspector's guidelines. I can confirm that the tree officer has visited the site. I unfortunately can't confirm exactly when, but I do recall in discussing this site with them that they have been to the site on at least one occasion. In respect of the SIL matter, I do not believe that SIL would be applicable for a hotel. But we wouldn't be determining that here today at this committee.
Thank you. Councillor Cole, would you like to come back?
Yeah, I just think the thing about the SIL is relevant because obviously if somebody does something incrementally, you know, anyway, I think everyone knows what I'm getting at. Thank you.
I think if SIL wasn't applicable, section 106 might be.
Thank you. I think we'll go on to Councillor Abbs now.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chairman. Light pollution. I'm really confused, especially given what the ward member said, and I'd like the officer to explain to me why, given it was a major issue at the appeal, how any increase can then be acceptable if it was a reason to be refused previously. And also, was given that we now understand that the windows have in fact already been installed, where is the evidence, of what lighting's used inside, how many looks it really? This lack of a site visit again is biting.
I think it was covered in the report that on the original appeal there was no submission of light emission given, but I'll let. There is now, but I'm sure Mr. Brown will clarify that for you. Any other questions? Was that it? Right. No,
I mean, I was kind of curious as to how many of the previous kind of planning permissions that were ignored and the lack of enforcement, because we have been to this site in the past a year or so ago,
that's why
but it's not really relevant.
That's why we're here tonight. Yeah. Mr. Brown.
In respect of the light pollution matter that the inspector relied on at the previous appeal, I would direct members to page 61 of the agenda. In particular, paragraphs 20 and 21 of the inspector's decision letter. Clearly, the inspector noted that no technical information had been put forward at that time by the appellant to demonstrate that the impact of light spill from the existing building would be comparable to that if the proposed changes were to occur. And no evidence had been provided to demonstrate how any light spillage could be mitigated against. That is the crucial difference in this application, is we do have a lighting assessment that has been produced by a lighting specialist, a qualified lighting specialist, and it concludes that any lighting would be negligible and not impact on the dark skies of the AONB. As such, I would be concerned if members were to determine that the application should be refused on lighting, pollution, dark sky grounds, given that we have no other expert evidence to the contrary.
Councillor Adams wants to come back, but I've
Yeah.
got a question there. We have made an assessment that X amount of lux at X number of meters is acceptable. Is there some standard that we say that that is acceptable in planning terms, or is, or I mean, how much is it in? Is it 20% in, 10% or 99%, or where is it in terms of being acceptable? Light is a big issue here that's been brought up tonight. I think we need to get an idea as to what X number of lux at what distance is in terms of being acceptable. Then I'll come back to Councillor Adams for a minute.
Not necessarily in terms of lux. I mean, there are standards by the Institute of Lighting Engineers that refer to zones, dark sky zones. In particular, large parts of the AONB are within zone E1. I do not have the numbers off the top of my head as to what lux or there are various different units that are referred to in terms of light.
But the reason I asked the question is we have approved it on the fact that we've been given this figure. And I'm just wondering what we're pitching it against. You know, what is the standard to say is acceptable for this application going forward?
But the lighting assessment that's been submitted has identified what the current baseline lighting zone is around the main dwelling area and where these pavilions are proposed to be based, which is lighting zone E2, which is not total dark skies, and has demonstrated that this increase in lux of 0.5 won't increase the lighting zone impact of the development proposed.
Thank you. My apologies, Councillor Adams.
No, thank you very much, Chairman. The thing I'm curious about, of course, is that the work has been done. So we're having to rely on some kind of theoretical assessment when the work has been done and it can be measured. You know, a nighttime visit. We have never done one before, a nighttime site visit, but that would have certainly, you know, anecdotally we hear from all of the people presenting that there's lots of light pollution from this property already. So I'm just confused as to why we're relying on a theory when the practicality is actually there. The measurement can be made.
I think it does say in the documentation somewhere that when blinds are drawn, but there's no conditions on.
Well, it also doesn't say what light bulb wattage is fitted either. But
Mr. Brown.
Thank you, Chairman. I just want to clarify that not all the works have been done. It's parts retrospective. Some of the changes to the fenestration on the Eastern Pavilion only has been completed. The Western Pavilion has not yet been built. So the lighting assessment uses quite advanced computer modelling, which is common practice to assess the lighting impact. And I would just mention again that the assessment has been made on the worst case scenario with no curtain coverings, no window coverings at all. There are no lights proposed on the outside of the building. This is just assessing the light emanating from the fenestration that's now proposed. There is a condition that's proposed to prevent any lighting without further lighting assessments to ensure that no increase in lighting takes place.
And I just need a bit more clarification on this, I'm afraid. Does that assessment tell me what type of light? Is it halogen? Is it LED? There are lots of reports out in the industry about LED light being not good for nature. And of course, we're all rapidly moving to what colour is the light? What colour quality is the light? You know, the Cree factor. There's all sorts of things that come into when you play with light. And as sophisticated as that model may be, you know, where's the result that says, well, yes, in this situation, he's used a 2700 degree, 85 Cree light bulb, and therefore it's acceptable within the model. Whereas he can tomorrow change the light bulb and it can be twice that.
Mr. Brown.
Unfortunately, I don't have those details off the top of my head as to the exact type of lighting that they've assessed it against.
Okay.
But it would be standard lighting used in the dwelling.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Cant, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I must admit, somewhere along here, I've got a bit lost over this lighting thing. It appears very clear from the inspector's report that these various stages of this development are in an area where more light into the environment, more light spillage, more light pollution is frowned upon. Okay, it appears to me there's some sort of cumulative issue here, isn't there? And I can't understand how any further development beyond where they are today, whether or not it's being done applied for retrospectively won't cause additional light pollution. Irrespective of an individual report on an individual stage of the development saying this meets some sort of criteria which the chair has tried to tease out of you. I'm frustrated by the fact it appears that someone's just doing whatever they want and sort of saying in retrospect, well, here's a report, we've done it. I don't get the inspector seems so strong.
Brown is
the inspector seems so strong about this. In paragraph 25, I don't see in the conditions you've imposed, apart from the external lighting, that you've dealt with that. I don't get it. I don't get what the link is.
Can I take this question, Chairman?
Indeed, Mr. Till.
Members, the inspector's decision revolves around the fact that there wasn't sufficient information submitted with the appealed application to demonstrate that there was a non-harmful impact as a result of the additional lighting that was proposed. So it's a lack of information that the inspector raised concerns about and that led ultimately to the refusal. That lack of information fails to demonstrate that there is no harm resulting from this additional lighting. The difference, the progression from that previous appeal situation is that there is now a professional report carried out to the relevant technical standards to demonstrate that the lighting proposed will not result in a harmful increase to the lighting overspill created by the site in the particular part of the AONB that it is within. Now, members, if you have concerns with the adequacy of the report in terms of the level of technical detail that it goes to, then that may be a consideration for a reason for refusal in terms of still being dissatisfied with the information provided, that it demonstrates that there isn't harm associated with this development. But it is your officer's professional opinion, having reviewed the report, that it does provide a sufficient demonstration of that. So in your officer's view, we consider the reports to be acceptable. Members, you may individually take a different view when you decide to vote on the resolution to this recommendation to the inspectorate. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Till. But I can see the members' concern, and Councillor Abbs in particular. Is this a 90-watt bulb? Is it a 200-watt bulb? It doesn't state what lighting, is actually put in each of these sockets. So that at the end of the day, you get put 0.5 lux. Was it halogen 6x4 bulb? That's I can see. I mean, if the condition is that at any stage we can't have any more than 0.5 lux coming from the buildings, and by determining that it sets what bulbs will be used, then I think that would clarify. But it's an open-ended issue, isn't it, as to where's that 0.5 lux come from when we don't know what light is being generated in the first instance through the windows. Okay, we'll move on. Councillor Bennyworth.
Thank you, Chairman. And if I can just keep Mr. Till in the hot seat for a moment longer. Just for clarification, Mr. Till, could you confirm that assessment was made when the garage, for want of a better word, the garage doors were in place, or had that taken into consideration the additional fenestration which is now in place?
I will have to refer that onto the case officer, Councillor Bennyworth. I'm not personally familiar with the detail of the report myself.
Mr. Brown, can you help us?
The lighting assessment assessed the baseline as was approved, and that included the lighting scheme that was approved under the replacement dwelling as well. It had to take into account that lighting scheme in its baseline. So it took measurements as a baseline and then what the proposed would be.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Chairman, if I may, one more, Mr. Brown. I think it was Councillor Cole touched on this was viewed as a minor development. Could you elaborate, please?
This is a Section 73 application for a minor material amendment to the previously approved scheme. Now it's officer's view that the changes proposed in this application fall within the description of the development for the original approval. whilst there is an increase in floor area, that is still considered to be a minor material amendment as opposed to a non-material amendment.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Barnett.
Chairman, members, one of the issues which was very much in our minds when it first originally came forward has been mentioned again by Councillor Cole, one of the ward members tonight, and that's this issue of the spoil. And obviously the question to Mr. Dowding is that the roads along that network is not the widest, very narrow, very windy. What conditions would be imposed on the vehicle movements along that section of the road?
Mr. Dowding.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, we are very much aware of that, and that's why we asked for the spoil condition to be modified to allow for us to have information relating to the type and size of vehicles that are being proposed to be used to remove spoil, so that obviously we can then assess the routes for possible haul routes or even to determine what type of vehicles we would recommend are used along those routes because of the nature of that area. With this condition, it gives us the scope to discuss with the applicant the best way forward to remove spoil from the site to ensure that the most appropriate route and most appropriate vehicles are used.
Thank you. I mean, presumably the agent knows what the volume of soil is, length by breadth by depth, it equals volume, 16, 18 ton lorry or whatever divided into that lets me know how many movements there are of vehicles. So we get some idea, do we not? And there we go. Councillor Vickers.
My question really, it's a short and simple one. Is there nothing that no policy that we have that can deal with what is really quite a major application in terms of the amount of work that's going to be involved? I mean, it's equivalent to probably about 10 houses worth of concrete and earth movement and all the rest of it. And yet we seem to have, because it's not above ground, nothing that can cover what's going on below the ground, apart from possibly drainage. So am I right in thinking that can officers help us to find some reason why such an extraordinary application might actually fall foul of planning law?
Mr. Till, do you want to take this one?
Well, indeed, Councillor Vickers, you have your officer's recommendation of approval in front of you. You, in respect of assessing the concerns, our assessment is as set out in the agenda report. In terms of if members were concerned regarding the cumulative impact of development, then primarily, as you're aware, the visual assessment is the one that we would rely on for defining such an impact within the AONB. So in this particular case, where the understory development is confined to within the existing envelope of the developed land, within the envelope of the planning permissions that exist for ancillary buildings on the site, there would seem to be little to object on in terms of visual impacts that would quantify themselves as a detrimental impact on the AONB. Hence your officer's recommendation and advice that we don't view these as being matters that this application could be refused on.
Thank you. Councillor Abbs.
Yeah, biodiversity net gain normally gets mentioned sooner or later these days. Soil isn't totally devoid of life, no matter how even if you go down a few meters. I haven't heard, or have I missed how we are getting the biodiversity net gain with such a development like this?
Mr. Brown, you want to take this one?
we have to remember that this application is effectively seeking an amendment to a previous permission that was granted in 2018 when the core strategy policy requesting biodiversity net gain was in place, and it was considered acceptable at that point in time. And a landscaping scheme has been drawn up, has been considered acceptable by officers, and is secured in the conditions, proposed conditions. The impact of changing fenestration is not considered to warrant any additional biodiversity net gain measures. The impact of the enlarged basement has not been raised as requiring additional biodiversity measures, and the same with lighting.
Well, I guess I'm raising it now, aren't I? Is it just that we forgot about that because it's underground?
Sorry, I meant to say raised by officers, the ecologist in particular.
The ecologist didn't raise it. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I suppose I'm still very confused, Chairman, and I think I've had an explanation, but this whole business of overdevelopment on a site, I guess Mr. Till's point about visual impact, but generally we look at extensions and this, that and the other we don't use percentages anymore, we're not allowed to do that, but we're certainly allowed to go, that's a massive addition, doubling the size of that property is comes under that criteria. So forgetting the visual element, why can't I just consider this overdevelopment?
I think we are where we are. We're looking purely at the enforcement type issues of windows, and we're looking at the addition of this underground garage, which Mr. Tiller said.
It basically takes if I just think about this as an extension, underground extension or not, it's well in excess of, it's at least the same size as the house, is it not? I haven't done the measurements, but
it comes back to Councillor Vickers' point. It's underground, and
yeah, but I mean, if I'm in London, and for a long time they were allowed to go down and do basements, and now they've stopped it.
Well, every application we look at is on its own merit, and that's what we're looking at this evening. So. All done. Marvellous. No more questions. Thank you, officers, for those answers. So we're now up to debating this and see where we go. But I'll just remind members that, we're making a decision here this evening, which isn't binding. All we're doing is whether we do or we do not support approval when this goes to appeal with the inspector. So that's what effectively we're doing. We're showing our support of this committee that
Can I ask just for clarification? So even if we said we approve this, it wouldn't actually be an approval then, and even if we signed it off.
I think Mr. Till will clarify this, but all we're doing is showing the inspector that this committee supports the fact that we would approve this. We will go along with the approval with the condition that we can presumably contribute towards. Can we not conditions going forward, an agreement of conditions with the inspector? Mr. Till's obviously better versed than I am, but that's my understanding.
Thank you, Chairman. Would you like me to answer on that?
Thank you.
Yes. So this is a recommendation that is taken forward to be handed to the planning inspector. We would, as an authority, be asked in any case to comment on planning conditions, whether it was a refusal or an approval by the inspector. So the conditions are relevant in either case, in this particular case, and that would be the difference. However, if members chose to recommend refusal to the inspector, then it would be the usual exercise of seeking grounds to support those grounds of refusal, for those to be provided to the inspector as detailed refusal reasons that the authority would have used had it had the opportunity to determine this application in the normal fashion. Otherwise, our recommendation would be progressed with the officer's report and such additional conditions as members chose to impose with the recommendation to the planning inspector. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Till. We're open to discussion and debate now, members. Who'd like to start, please? Councillor Vickers, thank you.
Chairman, this is we're not going to get many like this, I don't believe. I mean, my first thought is that, sustainability includes social sustainability. What sort of person is doing this? We haven't seen the applicant. We know very little about the applicant, not appeared for us, but I do wonder what sort of contribution to West Berkshire society or the future of the social life of West Woodhay or the surrounding villages is going to result from this development were we to approve it. So I do wonder where the social sustainability side of it is. Maybe it'll come in useful if we reach Armageddon and we all need an underground bomb shelter. Maybe that's a contribution that we should think of in the future. But in terms of, I mean, if the pockets of the applicant should ever become empty, what will happen to this? We will be left with a great sort of white elephant with an underground. Who's going to ensure that the drainage implications are going to be maintained? I mean, maintenance of this development is going to be huge. I'm not against. It's great that we have these places like Chatsworth House and so on that we are part of our heritage, and it'd be very difficult to do such a massive above ground development in the modern era, I'm sure. But I don't think we'd sort of concede that somebody would go underground to get around planning policy. But get to the point, I've been struggling with my limited knowledge of planning, how we could refuse this. I do think it needs a nighttime site visit with the benefit of the fact that a lot of this is retrospective, it's built. Let's ask for all the lights to be turned on and go up on Wayfarers Walk one night and see what it actually looks like. Or at least recommend to the inspector that should be something they consider when it goes to the appeal, seriously, because that seems to be unresolved. Okay, we've had a professional report. It's the lack of information that was the reason for the appeal, not for no, it's definitely not going to satisfy me. But even with this professional report, as Councillor Absa said, there are a lot of factors in lighting which are difficult to assess until you see it happening. Same with drainage. So I think we're left with those two potential reasons for refusal, colleagues, on the drainage, where you've got a structure which is probably more than 3 times the bulk of what is already approved. And that will have at least 3 times as big an impact upon the underground water flows in what is, I think, put me right, somebody, by nodding, is it chalk subsoil? And we know that, well, even chalk or clay, we don't know what happens underground. You get the point. I don't think we have sufficient evidence to say that this will not have an impact upon. I think,
Councillor Vickers, if you look at the report, mitigation has been made by a porous material around the bunker, for want of a better word.
That will increase the flow.
Yeah, but equally, if you read the documentation, it does say then the strata beyond that would slow it up. But anyway, I'm not going to get into. I'm not.
I'm not an expert, but I just feel that if we were minded to refuse it, those are the only 2 reasons, because everything else is covered by conditions. Which of course can be varied with another application. And we've got something like 20 applications.
Thank you, Chairman. I am concerned about the glazing in the AONB. On page 30, it talks about the alterations to the Eastern Pavilion, and it talks about timber doors being replaced with glazed entrances and windows. There are several points where it talks about more and more glass. So bearing in mind, people this evening have talked about the reasons why the inspector rejected the appeal, it seems to me that we're going in the wrong direction when it comes to the glazing issue. It looks like more and more stuff is going in. Similarly to Councillor Vickers, I'm really concerned about the drainage as well. So the fact it says there's an absence of evidence and it's based on opinion, I think, it's all very well saying we'll condition things, but I think we should have more evidence in front of us to make an informed decision. And like Councillor Abs, I'm concerned about the biodiversity net gain as well. As he says, a lot of soil is going to be lost. A lot of trees have been lost there already, and the condition talks about 1 barn owl box. I don't think that's sufficient. And as we know, the biodiversity net gain baseline is January 2020. So I think we need more evidence from the tree officer. In his opinion, what does he consider to have been there in January 2020? And how will he use that to inform his decision about what biodiversity net gain would be appropriate? Because I'm concerned that we're not looking back far enough in time to see what has already been lost.
Thank you.
And also, I mean, when I went to have a look on site, there's a pond there that seems to have been filled in. So I don't quite know what that's all about. I referred earlier to the fact that we await determination on this installation of 2 ponds and retrospective permission for retention of an existing pond. Well, there seems to be a pond there that's just full of gravel at the moment. So, you know, there's all these unanswered questions. We need to look at all of this in the round. So I'm not satisfied that I've got enough evidence in front of me to support this, to be honest.
Okay,
thank you.
Councillor Abbs.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, lack of a site visit. You know, whether we were refused entry, whether it was supposed to happen last week, and you know, whatever, it doesn't matter. We haven't had one, and that leaves me uneasy again. I'm also uneasy because every time we have visited the site in my time on planning committees, which is not very long, there's always something that requires enforcement. That seems to be going on there, and yet again this evening it's coming back. Now, you know, we're not allowed to kind of really take that. We have to look at it as a fresh, and I do so. But I still want to note that it's really very annoying to have these retrospective. What's wrong with putting the planning application in and doing the work after the planning permission is given? There is no need for it in this case to be done, and then someone's noticed, so I better put a retrospective in. It's just annoying. But anyway, so everybody said about light and so on. I just, you know, forgetting the fact that we can't see this garage, this massive extension, in no way in my mind is this a minor amendment to what was previously approved. And I was on the committee when that approval was given. It's not a minor. If someone had put that in front of me at the time, it would not have got approved. And so I'm absolutely not minded to approve. Oh yeah, we'll just let that, just because I can't see it. I know it's there, you know, and in my head, the rules basically say, look at the floor space of the development, and has this gone beyond what was originally intended? And it has. This has been application, just look at the application history, application after application after application, making it bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And as we go along, we've got retrospective. And I think it's our advice to the inspector would be, look at this. There's loads of reasons why you can say no to it. Overdevelopment, light pollution, you know, impact on the AONB, and, you know, let the inspector, because actually it doesn't matter what we say. All the officers are going to do is put our thinking towards the inspector and let the inspector make the decision.
Thank you. Councillor Cannon.
Try and keep you brief, Chair. I know it's been a lengthy debate. I concur with Councillor Abbs. My concern is that it doesn't feel to me as though we have enough information about the total cumulative effect of the nighttime impact of the lighting that's being installed in all the various phases of this substantial development to be absolutely convinced that we should back a recommendation to the inspectorate. I'm not at all convinced by that. And yeah, I think I concur with you on that.
Thank you. Councillor Bennyworth.
Thank you, Chairman. I concur with Councillor Kant's comments. Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Well, we seem to have concluded on our debate, but we don't seem to have a proposal or a second of which way you'd like to go. We've got Councillor Kant looking very excited here. He's got something here.
Only I'm perfectly happy, yes, to say that, you know, I'm perfectly happy to propose that we reject the officer's recommendations.
About a second.
We do need to know why.
Yeah, we need the reasons. I mean, I think they've been given by Councillor Abbs quite conclusively.
Insufficient detail of the cumulative effect of lighting impact.
Thank you.
And overdevelopment. I think, you know.
Drainage. And what was the other one you brought?
Light.
AONB, wasn't it? Light in the AONB.
Yes. Tranquility and lighting.
Yeah.
If and when this is ever fully utilised, it's not just the lighting. I think it will disturb the tranquility, the numbers of people, you know, that could potentially use this facility, potentially.
Okay, I'm going to propose it. Do I have a second? I'll take Councillor Culver on that one, I think. So we've got the reasons of our refusal. Mr. Tilt, would you like to reiterate?
Thank you,
With the help of
Chairman.
Mrs. Armour.
Yeah, to collate what I've just heard, I have insufficient information in respect of the cumulative impacts of lighting on the AONB, insufficient information on biodiversity net gain, insufficient information on drainage conditions, and a concern with the proposed development representing overdevelopment of the site. And can I just request that in respect of that overdevelopment, the harm and policy background for that, can Councillor Abbs, perhaps as he's raised those matters, if he could possibly point me in the direction of the harm that he's concerned is resulting from the overdevelopment and the policy that would be in conflict with.
The sheer number of rooms that the house becomes, the underground facilities, private or not, the number of journeys in and out. This having a development of this size significantly impacts the area of ONB, whether it's in underground or overground. You still got to get in and out of it. The other thing I would say is, Mr. Till, in terms of the lighting side, one of the biggest bits are missing is the type of light. What color is it? How many lumens is it? What type is it? LED? Is it there's all sorts of aspects in terms of the quality of light that determine what impact it will have on nature and on
the question is, how do you work back from 0.5 lux?
Well, exactly, and then the inspector can dig into that, just say, well, okay, what are you proposing? And if the applicant can come forward with significant evidence to say this won't harm the wildlife and so on.
I think we've collected all of our concerns.
Chairman,
to add there, Mr. Chair?
Chairman, if I could just clarify then to try to tie together the concerns regarding overdevelopment, that it would lead to an intensification of activities on the site that would fundamentally change the character of the site within the AONB. That was my reading of that.
Thank you. I come back now to the proposer and seconder, Councillor Canton Culver. Are you happy as we've collated those conditions or those concerns before we go forward? Councillor Culver, yeah, thank you. Councillor Canton. Therefore, members, the recommendation is to delegate the Service Director for Development to make representations at appeal that planning permission should be refused. Mrs. Arm, would you please conduct the...
So those in favour of those representations being refusal, can you show your hands? So I think that's 7. And those against?
I'll just abstain on that one.
Okay.
Thank you.
So
that's fine.
That's carried then.
Good. Thank you very much. Thank you, Councillor Cole. Thank you, Councillor Rolls. Thank you to our representatives from Arthur Jonas and the members of the Parish Council. Thank you very much. You're welcome. We move on now. It's 9 o'clock. I think we've got time. Yeah, we've got time to complete this one, do you think? We've got an hour and a half. I think we'll be all right. So we go on to the third application, which is 22/02145. This is land adjacent to the Phoenix Centre, Newtown Road, Newbury. This is construction of 18 new homes with associated parking, access, amenity and landscaping. And this has come to committee due to this development being on West Berkshire Council owned land. And the council is the applicant in this case. And Mr. Till will do the presentation on this application. Over to you, Mr. Till.
Thank you, Chairman. If you just bear with me while I do the workings for sharing my screen.
So, Chairman, just before we begin, I forgot to mention in my declarations, this is my ward, of
Thank
course.
you.
So I apologise.
I haven't got you down as this is your ward. I've got Barnett, Drummond, and is it clarification, Councillor Barnett, please.
Well, my understanding, and that's why I specifically emailed members the other day when I picked it up, that it's on the east side of Newtown Road, on from the St John's roundabout right up to the retail park. On that side is Eastfields ward of Newbury Town, which is part of Greenham West Berks Council ward. So as far as I'm concerned, it's not Falkland unless I'm told to the contrary.
So Parish Council, not West Berkshire Council. I'm a parish councillor as well. Or Greenham.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it is the wrong ward that's on the papers. It should be Greenham Ward.
But it doesn't change my declaration of interest because I'm still a councillor for it.
So let's have some clarification. Who's going to be speaking on this one tonight? As the councillor.
Well, if it's correct, and I think I am correct, I'm hoping to give a few words of wisdom around the table. It won't be for long, but it will just be a short ward members' comment.
Okay. Everybody happy with that? Yeah, sure. We will continue. Mr. Till, you've got yourself organised now.
Thank you, Chairman.
Well done.
I have. Thank you, members, Chairman. This application is for the construction of 18 one and two bedroom flats, all of which would be affordable housing. And the application is before committee where the site is owned by the council and the council is applicant as part of a joint venture with Sovereign Housing. The site is within the boundary of Newbury, and under planning policy, there is a presumption in favour of residential development. The site edged in blue is a predominantly residential area. There is a bridleway marked in green to the south of the site. The topography of the site and surroundings is on a hill and with a drop in the ground level to the north of the site to the car park of the Phoenix Centre. The housing would be provided in 2 blocks of 9 flats, one for social rent and one for shared ownership. 6 would be 1 bedroom and 12 would be 2 bedroom. The council's policy is for 30% of the units, 5 units, to be affordable, with 4 social rent and 1 shared ownership. The remainder of the affordable housing, which would be beyond the policy requirement, is proposed to be secured by planning condition. It's understood that this fits with the grant funding to provide the development. The buildings are proposed to be set to either side of the northern boundary with a turning head and parking between them. Amenity areas towards the side boundary and parking and access to the southern boundary. The roofs would incorporate mitigation and enhancements for biodiversity and protected species to be conditioned. The flats would meet the minimum internal space standards. The internal layout for the flats would be the same on each floor, with each unit having a private balcony area. The report outlines at point 6.33 that air source heat pumps for hot water for all the flats would be provided. An air source heat pump for hot water for all the flats would be provided, which combined with the building fabric and other measures would provide a 57.1% reduction in emissions compared with Part L of the 2021 building regulations for a 2-bedroom flat. The buildings would be 3-storey of red brick, render and tile roof. The elevations show how the buildings would address the changing ground levels on the site. The section drawings show the changes in ground level along Newtown Road and the building height of the proposed buildings in relation to adjacent buildings. The report sets out that the overall scale, massing and height is considered acceptable in its impact on the character of the surrounding area, including the similar setback from Newtown Road and separation distance between the buildings. The areas of amenity space to the side boundaries and the balconies would provide a total of 255 metres square. The report sets out at point 6.1 that this would be around 43% or 195 square metres short of the recommendations of the quality design supplementary planning documents, which recommends a amenity space of 25 square metres per unit. The report also sets out that an off-site contribution for public open space is required where it cannot be accommodated on the site.
Mr. Till, would you stop? Gentlemen at the back, Councillor Foot, if you're going to have a discussion, Mr. Councillor Abb's having difficulty concentrating. If you like, go outside and do it, that's fine. I'm quite happy, but that's fine. Okay, continue, please, Mr. Till.
Thank you. The update sheet outlines the calculation and that a commuted sum of £13,130 would be required. The report also sets out a sum of £5,860 sought for the upkeep of the bridleway to the south of the site for the additional use of the new residents. This plan shows the removal of trees to the south and west of the site to provide access and parking areas, along with the retained hedges in green and additional tree and shrub planting. The site contains some identified contamination, and the report outlines that Environmental Health have reviewed this and agree that, subject to the submitted contamination and remediation reports, the recommendations of which are to be conditioned. The council's tree officer is concerned about the impact on trees beyond the eastern site boundary and the impact of the building within their root protection areas. A condition requiring trial pits to establish the roots and type of foundation has been recommended in the report. The planting proposal has been amended and details of constraints due to underlying services have been provided. The tree officer remains disappointed with the proposed landscaping scheme and had hoped for more trees and hedging to be retained on the site. The report outlines the issues initially identified by the lead local flood authority, which have now been addressed, and the drainage strategy is considered acceptable. In particular, the infiltration of drainage is not feasible, so drainage will be to a surface water drain off-site with permeable paving and storage crates on-site. Following additional information and amendments, the proposed vehicle access is acceptable to the local highway authority. Additional pavement is proposed to the southwest of the site. The visibility splay was increased to the front, to the east, from the vehicle access. The number of car parking spaces highways have confirmed is acceptable, and overall that the highways matters can be addressed by conditions. The report at point 7.1 sets out the planning balance. While there is an under provision of amenity space for residents on site, loss of trees, and that the buildings will not be zero carbon from renewable energy generation. This is considered by your officers to be outweighed by the provision of 100% affordable housing and the associated economic benefits, with all other matters being sufficiently mitigated and policy compliant. The update sheet sets out the public open space that I've already referred to, and that first homes provision is not required for this site, and some updates to the conditions and section 106 heads of terms. The recommendation is for approval subject to the conditions and the section 106 heads of terms set out in the report and the update sheet. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Till. Mr. Dowding, your observations on the highways on this application, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just like bit of feedback. I'd just like to confirm that there are a sufficient number of car park spaces within this site. All the spaces are now correct in the right size, whereas previously there were a few short ones. I can also confirm that there's at least 2 disabled spaces being provided in here by the looks of it.
Thank you. Now come on to our attendees this evening, and it's good to see Councillor Foot here from Newbury Town Council. Councillor, you're first up, as always. You know the format. 5 minutes, 4 minutes I'll give you notice, and in conclusion, with 10 seconds to go. So when you're ready, Councillor, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Chair, and good evening, everybody. When this application came before the Newbury Town Council Planning and Highways Committee, we supported this application. It was very refreshing to see an application of this size that was entirely affordable in the sense that has been already outlined. We were also encouraged with the sustainability aspect, the fact that item CS15 was addressed with the air source heat pump provision, which we applaud. So we had no compunction really other than to support this application, and I'd be very happy to answer any questions members may have if they'd like to submit them. Thank you.
Members, any questions of Councillor Foote? Yeah, Councillor Ralph.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I do like to see the air source heat pump. And are you quite happy with the lack of solar though?
Well, I apologise for causing some degree of distraction to you when I was having that conversation, but that was something that perhaps the applicant might be able to address later on. The other thing actually on that sort of topic, and listening to the previous application you were discussing about the lighting and the fact that these days, you know, we do have to pay attention to external lighting, whether they be LED and the impact that has on insects and what have you. So I think as we go forward, these issues are going to become more of an issue in planning. But yeah, I hope that some degree answers your question.
Thank you. Any more questions of Councillor Foote? No, thank you, Councillor. Nice to see you again. Thank you.
Thank you.
Where are we? No objectors, no supporters, but we do have the applicant, Mr. Nick Fisher. So Sovereign Housing. Nice to see you, sir.
Good evening.
You know the format. We look forward to your presentation. You have 5 minutes. Give you a note at 4 and a conclusion in 10 seconds. When you're ready.
Thank you, Chairman and members. I'm the project manager from Sovereign Housing Association. I'm managing this project. I have been since December. I'm here tonight to represent Sovereign Housing Association and also Home to West Berkshire. And basically, I represent the applicant. The intention is that if planning permission is granted, the land which is owned by the council will be transferred to West Berks Council. The land which is owned by the council will be transferred to Home to West Berkshire, which is a joint venture between the council and Sovereign Housing Association. And then the land will be developed by them, this company, and then Sovereign will purchase the finished homes and manage and run them as we do with all affordable housing. I just wanted to mention, obviously, there's 2 buildings, there's 18 flats, all affordable housing, 9 for social rent and 9 for shared ownership. Those are the tenures that we've set out to provide. The scheme's been carefully designed. We hope it should improve the appearance and character of the area and obviously provide much needed affordable housing. I just wanted to mention some of the changes or additional information we provided during the planning application. So overcome officer concerns. We provided detailed sustainable drainage information, which is understood to be fine. Also, a detailed landscape scheme has been submitted. There is the removal of some trees on site, but there is difficulty in putting new trees back due to the amount of buried services across that land. But we think there's sufficient screening there already for this development, so we don't think it will appear to be stark. And then there is an issue regarding the proximity of the buildings to the Leylandii hedge, which is in the ownership of Two Saints Hostel, and we've spoken to them. They support our development. They're also a housing association. We've taken independent advice from a tree consultant, and the feeling was that a Leylandii hedge would not have roots that extend to the full 11-metre RPZ as shown. That's the British standard. So the advice that we gained independently from our own ARB consultant was there's a low chance of harm to that Leylandii hedge, and we're happy to modify foundation design as required after the trial pits have been dug. We've located where the roots are. So I think that concludes my presentation. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Fisher. Any questions of Mr. We do, Councillor Culver. Well done.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you for your presentation. Did you say 9 homes for social rent and 9 for shared ownership?
Yes.
Yeah, because it says in here in the report that there's going to be 1 first home, but I don't know whether it's appropriate to ask you this or to ask it of officers. I'm not quite sure about the maths there, because I think we're supposed to do 70% social rent, 25% first homes, and then 5% shared ownership.
Mr.
So I'm
Fisher
just
can't,
wondering if
we'll take that question.
Yeah,
with
just to
officers.
make sure we've
Do you want me
got
to take that question? Okay, I can do. I think that proportion you mentioned is of the 30% that you require of all developments.
Mhm.
We're providing 100% affordable housing.
Yeah.
And those are the two tenures we're showing. We're not providing a first home. Apparently, developments which are all affordable housing don't need to provide a first home. We did query that yesterday. That wasn't the original intention. We'd rather not do that as a housing association. I suppose if you, well, I guess you don't really have a policy basis to insist. If we had to, I suppose we could. We'd rather not because we think these tenures are better.
Okay, because it says one unit is required to be a first home in 6.3.
Yeah.
So maybe that's something to go back to.
We'll ask the
officer.
officer,
Yeah,
actually.
thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Abbs.
Yeah, I'll say it anyway. Great air source heat pump. Thank you very much. Why no solar? Why no EV charge point?
There are EV charge points in the application. At the moment, there are.
I take that back. I looked and I couldn't see them.
No, they serve the visitor spaces. However, new building regs have kicked in. The 2021 building regs kicked in this year. And so there may be scope for more charging points because we have to meet building regulation requirements.
Well, no, that's fine. I missed it in the document. And the lack of solar.
Well, the lack of solar. Well, I did have a discussion yesterday with our head of technical at Sovereign. We thought the fabric first approach was the way to go. It makes there's costs involved with all these things, and this gives you the best bang for your buck. So we've gone fabric first, air tightness, good thermal insulation, and then an attention to bridging. But we've also gone for air source heat pumps because we thought that was also a good way to spend your money. And so we are, I think, 57% above the 2013 regs. When I spoke to him, I did mention the scope for PV on the roofs. Apparently there are new products on the market which weren't available a year ago or 18 months when we put this together, which could allow PV to be, the benefits could spread to all the flats. In the past, that wasn't very easy to do and very expensive, and now it's becoming cheaper. Our preference wasn't for PV, but I suppose if the Home to West Berks joint venture, if their board wanted it, it could be provided.
So you're not actually opposed to it. If somebody came along and said, here's a solution, maybe they throw the SIL money at it or something, you could quite easily implement it.
We would consider it. It's not our chosen approach, but it is obviously the council is 50% member of the firm developing this. So.
Yeah, well, you've gone so far to get everything. Fabric first, totally agree, and air source, totally agree, but then you just need a very small amount of power to generate and make all that work, which you could do with solar. So.
Thank you. Councillor Vickers.
Yes, I just want to know where I can't see any plans for the layout of the cycle store. There are two plans for bin stores, which are very similar, but I couldn't see one of the cycle store. I'm only relying on what's in the pack, but it's one of the things that I always look for. Is how are you going to?
Apologies, I can't recall seeing a plan for that either. There must be one. Apparently, there's 32 spaces according to the planning statement because I read it when I reviewed the situation. There should be.
Which says it. Well, you've got two blocks which each say they're cycle stores, but it doesn't say how they're laid out inside. That's all.
I honestly don't know if we prepared a plan of that detail, but I think there's 32 spaces.
Maybe I can ask that of the officers.
Okay.
Highways may have already looked into that. Right. Cheers.
Thank you, Mr. Fisher. That was very interesting and for your presentation. So that concludes the questions of our attendees. Now we come on to our ward member, Councillor Barnett.
Right, okay. You starting my 5 minutes?
I haven't.
No, well, you only get about a minute, so don't worry.
I'm just going to let you get settled when you're ready, sir.
Well, members, I think if this application meets your favour tonight, I will see this as a completion of a long project which started when the new Phoenix Centre was commissioned back before I left the council in 2007. In fact, I was the executive member for adult services at Council Williston. In those days, it was under adult services. That whole site, of course, had various different issues to address, not only Phoenix, but obviously Two Saints, and then the land which was adjacent, which we're considering tonight. So this is why I see it as a completion after several years. To me, it does tick various boxes, although probably not everything, and Councillor Abbs has just identified a couple of points which perhaps would have been nice to have been included, but nevertheless, it's nice to see affordable housing, and it's nice to see smaller units, which Councillor Culver regularly advocates on various applications. And it's nice to see that there's air source heat pumps and a sustainable construction, as well as considering biodiversity. We've just heard about a comment about where the cycle parking provision is likely to be placed, but nevertheless, it was mentioned that there was cycle provision, so I'm obviously pleased about that. There was a little concern in relationship to communal facilities, but of course we have considered a lot of applications where there's been very minimal communal facilities. And when I look very closely at the site, and there is actually 2 or 3 open areas very close by. So I think that would probably overcome that little issue. Regarding the 3-storey aspect, Jago Court, very close by, very prominent, very much in the forefront of the surrounding street scene of Newtown Road, and I think this would probably fit in quite nice with those existing apartments where they stand out on the highway. It's nice to think that the bridle way is going to be kept up to standard. This must be welcomed. But of course, I would also probably have liked to have heard we could have had some extra trees, but we've just heard from the representative Sovereign that it could be difficult. Probably that is the only point that I would make as a concern I've had. So that's my very minimal presentation, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Barnett. Any questions of the councillor? No, thank you very much indeed. Right, our opportunity to ask questions now of our officers. Mr. Till or Mr. Dowding? Councillor Abbs.
I'm not sure who it would be for. It's back to the EV charge points. There's 2 marked. Now I haven't managed to spot the symbol. There's 2 marked on the plan. Would it be possible for officers to negotiate with the developers to have at least one of them shifted so it's not all visitor charging? I know that EV charging is for the semi-wealthy, but with EV cars now down at the £6,000 level for second-hand, they will in a few years' time arrive at a point where even people in these type of housing may be able to afford them. Very simple change to, I think, on the positioning of one of them.
Yeah. Mr. Till.
Thank you, Chairman. Members, if this was seen as a concern in terms of the location of the EV charging points, then it would be possible to alter the condition requiring provision of the EV charging points for submission of further detail in respect to the location of those charging points. So members could certainly elect to vote on an amended condition in that respect.
Yeah, all I'd be looking for is simply to allow the residents to be able to access the charging point as well as visitors.
There was mention there could be extra ones anyway, wasn't there? So, see where they go. Councillor Corvatt.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, just to return to my question that I made of the applicant about the proportions of housing. I mean, I very much welcome the fact that this is 100% affordable housing, but is it not the case that 70% of that 100% should be social rent, which by my calculation would be 13 rather than 9? And if you could just clarify about the fact that the pack says 6.3 says 1 unit is required to be a first home. If you could clarify that, I'd be grateful.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, the policy requirement applies only to the proportion of the affordable housing that would be covered under the policy. So affordable housing that goes above and beyond the policy is an additional benefit. the policy doesn't apply to it. So as long as the social housing allocation of the policy compliant units complies with the policy, there would be no objection in terms of housing. It's just additional planning benefits. In terms of first homes, if I refer you to point 2 of the update sheet, members, and with apologies because this is a confusing point within the report, and we actually only had clarity on it from the housing officer yesterday. There is no requirement, there's an exemption from her first homes provision for schemes providing 100% affordable housing, and as the affordable housing is secured in the section 106 and conditions at 100%, that would apply in your officer's view in this case.
Thank you, Mr. Till. No more questions? Jolly good. We open up to debate. Anybody got anything to start the debate with? Good. Councillor Wollaston. So it should be.
As a policyholder of the housing, I really welcome this scheme. We are very short of affordable housing in the district, and I hope we wholeheartedly support this unanimously.
Good. Councillor Vickers.
It's a very similar application to the Mabel Luke almshouses in Mill Lane, where I was responsible for steering it as the applicant through planning and then managing the property for 4 years. So I have a few comments based on that experience. The biggest problems we had with accepting new residents was deciding who should have which parking space, and it's going to be even more difficult now with the EV issue. And I actually think the best solution in the short term, at least, is to provide the EV charging points in the visitor parking, because they're likely to be unused overnight, which is when most of the residents will want to charge. And it gets over the argument about which resident should be allowed to have the parking space with the EV charging. Because what I think is much easiest to manage is if a particular space is allocated to a particular flat. Otherwise, that's just the easiest way to manage. So you have the flat number written on the space, but that's up to, it's a management issue rather than a planning issue. But it's just something in retrospect I wish had been done differently at the planning stage to allow the property to be managed better. And we also had problems with the cycle store, which is why I asked that problem. You've got to make sure that the cycle store is designed in such a way that it's usable. And ours wasn't. The roof blew off at the first, or collapsed on the first heavy rain shower. But again, it's probably a building regs issue, although managed to get through planning because these things aren't sort of looked at in detail. So it's all very well providing these things, but are they actually going to be used in the way that's intended? But I'm, really pleased to see that we've got a 100% affordable site at long last in Newbury. We're not getting enough of them.
Thank you, Councillor Abbs.
Yeah, thank you very much. I don't think it's going to be particularly controversial, this one, is it? So, well, I'm quite happy to put forward a proposal that we accept officers' recommendations, just with a couple of minor amendments. One I intimated to earlier, taking Councillor Vickers' point into account that there is one location that can kind of straddle both visitors and residents, and that just whether it's an advisory or whatever that because the developer was open to looking at the solar again, that they take another look at that community solar approach just to try and nudge it up again. But otherwise, very happy to see this coming forward.
Thank you, Councillor Barnett.
Well, we've already had a proposal, so I'm more than happy seconding the Councillor Abbs' proposal.
Thank you. I think we're concluded on the debate. So before I put this to vote, Mr. Till, can you just remind us of the conditions there, please?
So I've got a request to amend the EV condition to look at the location of charging points in respect of catering to both visitors and occupants. And I've got a request for an advisory to look at the community solar panel provision. Can I suggest that that should be a minuted note rather than, or perhaps an informative on the planning permission?
Happy to take your advice.
I would suggest in that case an informative for the attention of the applicant. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor Abt, you're happy with that? And Councillor Barnett, as seconder, you're happy with those conditions? Okay, then, so the recommendation is, before I ask Mrs Armour to do the vote, for Head of Planning Countryside be authorised to grant planning permission for this application, land adjacent to the Phoenix Centre at Newtown Road, for the construction of 18 new homes, provided that a Section 106 agreement has been completed by the 31st of January 2022, or such longer period that may be authorised by the Service Director of Development and Regulation in consultation with the Chairman of this committee and the Vice Chairman of this committee, and to delegate to the Service Director planning permission subject to the conditions listed as discussed tonight. So that is the recommendation. Mrs Armour, if you could conduct the vote, please.
Okay, so those in favour of that proposal? So that's unanimous then, in favour.
Thank you very much. So members, that concludes the business this evening. And if I could just ask everybody to just remain in position whilst the Zoom meeting is still live. And I'm sure we'll be advised when that's been closed. Therefore, I declare this meeting closed at 9:30. Am I right? Yeah, 9:30. Nice early finish. And thank you everybody tonight for your contribution. Thank you.